All right, good evening, everyone. I've got 6 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order our regular session of March 13, 2018. First item of business that we have following the call to order is opening prayer and pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. Councilmember Larson will lead us. If you'll join me in standing, please. Mr. Larson.
Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to pray and thank you for your grace. And I just want to thank you that you love us as we are, as we come. That is such a gift. I thank you for the blessings that we have as a community. And I ask that you would just give us wisdom and courage to do the right thing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor.
Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one, indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. All right, first thing I need to do is City Secretary has asked that I announce that anyone that's here observing the council meeting for the Hal Baldwin Scholarship, there is a sign-up sheet back in the vestibule. Make sure that you've signed up if you're here for that purpose. And then next we have a couple of presentations. The first is a presentation regarding the Planning Excellence Award. As you listed, who's got it?
Bryce, Bryce Cox said that he's moving quickly.
Ah, very good.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to present the Certificate of Achievement for Planning Excellence that was presented to the city for 2017. There's a little letter that I'll start off with just to read. It is addressed to the mayor. Dear Mayor Carpenter, it is with great pleasure that the Texas chapter of the American Planning Association presents the enclosed Certificate of Achievement for Planning Excellence to your Planning Department for 2017. This certificate recognizes the professional planning standards demonstrated by your planning staff and the funding and support exhibited by your City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission. More specifically, the City of Schertz has met the chapter's goals for increasing awareness of professional planning, recognizing planning departments which meet certain professional requirements, enhancing neighborhood and citizen recognition of planning efforts, encouraging the funding of professional training for commissioners and staff, and aiding in economic development and community image. I encourage you to share this award with your City Council and Commission at an appropriate time. The Board of Directors and the 2,000 members of the chapter look forward to your continued success and your leadership in community planning in Texas. And it's signed by Kimberly Mickelson, the president of the Texas APA chapter. And just a couple other items, just as a FYI for all of the council and the folks here this evening. This award really represents the city's commitment to planning as a whole. So it's not just the planners that we have up here, but really it's y'all and the Planning and Zoning Commission really volunteering your time, helping us make this happen. Also, this is the 4th year in a row that the city's been recognized by this award. And to give you a little bit of perspective, there's a little over 1,200 cities in Texas, and only 35 awards were given out. So very honored on that.
Very nice. It's great work.
So, there's also a nice certificate that they did give us. We've got a copy framed and hanging up in the planning offices as well. So I'll just show everybody that. So
Very nice. Well done. Thank you. And congratulations. So just how about one thing that you have to do to even be considered for this this achievement? What's something you have to do that we did to get there?
Sure. So actually some of the things we even did that gave us a lot of points. So it's a point-based criteria that goes from educational opportunities, existing training and professional staff, how often we update our comprehensive plans, including the master thoroughfare plan, so on and so forth. So specifically, some of the big point items that we got this year were updates to the master thoroughfare plan, the updates to the trail master plan, which came along with that master thoroughfare plan update. We ran some updates to the comprehensive land use plan, if y'all remember when we adjusted the portion along Wiederstein Road and I-35 between Wiederstein and 1103, and then all the various updates to the Unified Development Code. So we do get a lot of points for all of that.
Very good. Thank you. Well done. Council, any comments or questions on that one? Good stuff. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Job well done.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you. Indeed. All right, next item we have is another presentation. It's a plaque presentation regarding Project Warrior. Councilmember Gutierrez has the lead on this.
On February 24th, the city of Schertz participated in supporting the Operation Comfort 5K. And I have a plaque here for the city of Schertz, a Purple Heart sponsor, presented to the city of Schertz in appreciation for 8 years of continuous service in supporting this 5K run. This 5K run supports our wounded and injured service members. So I'm proud to present this to Mayor Carpenter on behalf of Operation Comfort.
Councilman, don't be picking up my bad habits. They're hard to quit. All right, the next thing we have this evening is employee recognition. We've added some new folks to the team. And I think first up this evening is a business office. By the way, before we call everybody up, for all of you that are joining the team, I'm going to offer you an opportunity to say hello at the microphone. It is not mandatory. Speaking in front of the council and everybody that's here is some folks like it, some don't. I'm going to give you an opportunity, but it's not required. That said, microphone's y'all's.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I would like to introduce you to Stacy Babb. She's from Arizona. She met her husband in college and has been married for 14 years. She has a degree in computer networking and certificate in human resources. She has 2 children, 9 and 12. They are in attendance tonight to see their mom.
Right. Howdy.
Her husband's job has allowed them to travel a lot and live in different areas of the U.S. She moved to the Schertz location, or the Schertz area, rather, in 2017, January of 2017, sorry. She started her career in utilities with the city of Mesa, Arizona, and thankfully found a position with the city of Schertz. In her spare time, she and her husband run around with their 2 daughters, different activities, gymnastics, horse riding, cheerleading, and choir shows. And lastly, when she's able to have a minute to herself, she enjoys photography and tinkering with her camera.
Oh, very good. So I only have one question for you then, tinkering with your camera. Canon or Nikon?
I have a Nikon.
Okay, all right. Microphone is yours if you'd like to say hello. First of all, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks. I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to work here. I'm looking forward to learning new things and working with all the residents here.
Wonderful. We're very happy to have you with us and hope you'll be with us for a long time. Thank you. All right, the library.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Evening.
It is my great pleasure to introduce tonight our newest staff member, Pamela Kurcheski. She does go by Pam. It's a little confusing because we have another Pam, so we're not sure if it should be Pam 1, Pam 2, Pam S, Pam K. We're not sure yet, but we're very glad to have her. She came to the library a little more than a year ago and actually started volunteering with us. And after a year or so, I guess we didn't scare her off. She decided to apply for an open position. So now she's been with us since the beginning of February. We even made her go to a day-long training last week that was rather intense on DISC and customer service, and she came back to work on Saturday, so I was really, really happy about that. We're very glad to have her. Pam was born in Kansas, and she was born in Columbus, Ohio, and moved to Kansas about age 14 or so, went to college there, became a teacher, moved to El Paso and started teaching, and there she met her husband, Tim. They've been married for 24 years, is that right? 24 years. Tim is retired military. He was in the Army, so they spent a great deal of their married life moving from place to place overseas, back and forth across the country. But during that time, Pam taught or worked in libraries on military bases or in schools in the places that they settled. She really does seem to enjoy working at the library and with the people there. So Pam and Tim both, they have a son named Kyle who's 22 and a dog named Bella. And Pam, this was sort of a trick. She didn't know this when I asked on her biography about what her hobbies are, because at the library we're always looking for someone who has a hidden talent that can teach a class for us. So she likes music, she plays the flute, she does handbells or in a bell choir. So I'm trying to figure out how we're going to incorporate that into a program. She doesn't know that yet, though. So anyway, but it's my great pleasure to introduce her to you tonight. So welcome, Pam. We're very glad to have you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really happy to be here, and just thank you. Grateful.
Wonderful. We're very glad to have you with us and hope you'll stay with us for a long time. Welcome. All right, police, our police department.
Good evening. We would like to introduce to you two of our new communication officers. They both started on February 5th of this year and are currently going through our training program. So first we have Ms. Diane DeLuca. She was born and raised in Sacramento, California, where she earned a bachelor's degree after high school. She started working with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office as a secretary in 1992, and then went through the academy and actually became an officer in 95. So she retired from Sacramento County along with her husband, and they have moved to Schertz after owning a sushi restaurant. And so they moved to Texas to be closer to family, and they are looking for another restaurant endeavor here in our area. So on her spare time, she likes to cook, bake, run, and go camping in the glamorous way of camping, and also taking her family or her daughter to volleyball. So,
Good. All right. Well, of course, we're welcome.
And then we have Miss Brandy Brinkman. She is currently, she's in the dispatch as well. And but she was born in San Antonio, but also raised in Schertz. She actually graduated from Clemens, and she attended Texas A&M University in College Station, where she received her bachelor's degree, and then she moved ahead to Sam Houston University, where she earned her master's degree. And she's currently enrolled to go to University of Texas Health and Science Center in San Antonio for her doctorate degree. So she'll be working with us part-time coming up, and she also works part-time for the Schertz Parkway physical therapy right here. So she lives still here in Schertz with her family, and she enjoys reading and working part-time, and she has a dog, and she's attending college, and when she's not attending college, she likes to work out and go running. So.
Very good. Well, welcome. So, Ms. DeLuca, if you like.
No. All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very glad to have you with us. Very glad. Ms. Brandy?
Thank you for the opportunity for being here, and hopefully we don't disappoint.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Welcome to you both. Yeah, I've known Brandy for a long time, since she was about that tall. Well done. Glad to have you both with us, and hope you'll stay with us for a long time. Welcome. All right, Fleet and Facility Services.
We have two. Council, Mayor. We'll start with Eric. He joined our fleet department on the 5th of February to help us with all the maintenance and repairs of our vehicles, fire apparatus, emergency services, equipment, all that stuff. He was born here in Seguin. He went to Byron Steel. He's accomplished some bronze and silver level certifications for Hyundai, where he worked at Hyundai for a few years. Currently lives in Cibolo with a sister and 2 dogs, and he loves working on classic cars. So I just have a short list here, but I thought it was good to point out that he's worked with his dad restoring cars since he was young, and he's done a 57 Bel Air. Who doesn't love a 57 Bel Air? 69 VW bus.
Nope.
73 VW Thing. I've got a Beetle down here, and one of my favorites is the 67 Dodge Dart with the slant 6. Just a cool car. So thank you for coming on board, Eric.
All right. First of all, welcome.
So Todd Buckingham started with us on the 20th as a facilities manager to help us with a lot of our city projects with buildings and maintenance and the care of our facilities. I got a lot of information here, so bear with me. I'm going to try to summarize. He's got a lot of experience, 35 years in the industry. He's helped the city of Schertz with some projects prior with the Aquatic Center and YMCA, window repairs, and he's worked on this fire station too here as of recent. But he comes from Trenton, Tennessee, worked on his uncle's farm for many years with horses and pigs, driving tractors. Graduated Science Hill High School in Johnson City, Tennessee, home of the Hilltoppers. And he loves playing football. He played that in high school. He graduated from North Carolina State University, where he played Wolfpack Rugby. He started his own construction company, developed his skills in his trades, secured his real estate license in Ohio, so he's kind of come full circle with everything. His family, his wife Kathleen, is the reason why he says he's a lucky man. Been married to her for years. He's got 2 daughters, Abigail, which is now 20, attended TCU in Fort Worth, and with a full-ride volleyball scholarship. His other daughter, Kate, is 18, and she currently attends Churchill High School as a senior now, but she reports to Point Army Academy on the 2nd of July to attend playing volleyball there, attend college, play volleyball there. His wife currently works at United Healthcare as a provider of relations for REP for their vision sector, representing 15 years working with eye doctors and eyeglass shops. He has 3 mutts that his wife loves to rescue, and he loves mountain biking, trails, races, loves working on bikes, buying parts for the bikes, watching bike videos, and reading mountain bike books. So he attends a lot of volleyball, high school club, VB tournaments nationwide, and now TCU frog volleyball and soon to be Army volleyball. And his motto is happiness was born a twin. So Todd Buckingham.
All right, welcome. Eric, if you like.
Thank you. I just want to say thanks for this great job opportunity.
Glad to have you with us. Love somebody that can turn a wrench. On a week ago Sunday, I rebuilt the headlight assemblies for a car I'm allowing my son to drive, and boy, did I need help. Anyway, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited about being here and working with the city of Schertz.
Wonderful. Very happy to have you with us.
Any questions?
Not yet. The air conditioning seems to be working, so we're good for the moment.
That's right. We're doing good.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Hope you'll be with us a long time. All right. Next thing I have on the agenda this evening, I have city events and announcements. And first, we have announcements of upcoming city events. Who has the duty this evening? Mr. Gonzalez? All right.
The duty this evening. So bear with me. We have a couple of announcements to go through. The first is that our spring cleanup is still going on. It's continuing through Sunday, March 25th. The drop-off location is at 125 Pecan Drive from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day. Wednesday, March 14th, which is tomorrow, there's a blood drive going on from 7:45 in the morning till noon, and this is outside in the parking lot of the community center, just right across the parking lot there. They are still accepting walk-ups, so if you're interested in donating blood, that will be going on. On Saturday, March 17th, is the Music in the Park series, the next one. It starts at 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. It's in Pickerel Park. There's going to be live music from Ravenmore, a traditional Celtic band or Celtic band. And on Tuesday, March 20th, there's going to be a bird walk at Crescent Bend Nature Park at 8 a.m. in the morning. At 11:30 the same day, we are going to be having our annual Employee Remembrance Day. This takes place out in front on Commercial Place, in front of Public Works and Parks building, the flagpoles there. It's an annual event that we remember city employees who have served the city 10 or more years and who have passed away. So that's at 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday morning, the 20th. On Thursday, the 22nd, the Chamber is going to be having their taste at Retama Park at 5 p.m. On Friday, March 23rd, is the pre-budget retreat for City Council, beginning at 8:30 a.m. over at our Civic Center. And then also, as part of the Main Street initiative that we have with the Main Street Committee, and then this most recent Schertz magazine, as you know, we had a couple articles about Main Street. There's going to be a grand opening for Rockets Feed and Bakery. This is going to be on March 27th at 5 o'clock p.m. And so from 5 to 5:30, which will give council enough time to come back for the council meeting that evening. They're going to be inviting the other Main Street businesses as well, so welcome for you to come out and attend. I believe they're going to have some pastries that they will provide. And then also to touch on that the Hal Baldwin Scholarship is open, and we're accepting applications. For more information, you can go to Schertz.com, but we encourage any high school senior that is a resident of Schertz who may want to be considering public service as a career to apply. So we just would like to get the word out on that.
And Sarah, if we had some students maybe come in a little bit late, there is a sign-in sheet.
That's correct.
In the
There's
foyer. So if you came in for that, on your way out, make sure you sign in so you can document
that
you were
you're
here.
committed for that. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item we have are announcements and recognitions by the acting city manager. Mr. James, have anything this evening?
No, thank you.
All right, then we have announcements and recognitions by the mayor. I don't have anything to add this evening either. So we will move on then to hearing of residents. And first to sign up this evening is Michelle Terleski. Michelle?
Michelle Terleski, 705 Maryland Drive, Schertz, Texas. I thought that was kind of cute, bird walk, you said. I could just see this little bird with a collar. People going. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the First Amendment again. I haven't heard anything from y'all about your codes, rules, regulations, whatever you're going to come up with. And I was just wondering what the status was on it, because elections will be coming up pretty soon, and we're going to be in the same situation we were in last year if we're not careful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next signed up this evening is Richard Elder.
Good evening, Mayor Carpenter and council members. I'm Richard Elder. I reside at 4317 Willow Oak in Schertz. It's near the 3009 and Wiederstein area. In the course of looking around the neighborhood there, I've noticed some zoning changes going on, and I decided to do some research on those. One of the signs had mentioned ZC 2017-016, and the sign said to contact the planning department or to look at www.schertz.com. Going to the Schertz website and putting in that zoning action number turned up nothing. Searching as best I could around there, I didn't find anything in regards to that. So that's kind of interesting. That I think that would be an opportunity that when there's a zoning change, it needs to be loaded into the website so that people can simply put that into the search engine and be able to find out what the issues are and be able to pull up the package. By way of experience, I'm a retired Air Force officer, radar controller, engineer, licensed professional engineer, and I hold a commercial pilot's license. Having said all of that, I also would like to point out what's good about the website. And that is, several years ago, I had suggested to the city secretary that there be an agenda item on the website, but also agenda item with supporting documentation. And that is really wonderful. That whole suite there, you can go and find everything that's happening tonight. And to that end, I read some of the zoning changes, and I point out that Ordinance 18S-10 probably needs to be changed because it's in error, even though it's in the final reading. In particular, that's rezoning 1.5 acres of land from single-family residential to office and professional located approximately 220 feet southeast of the intersection of East Live Oak Road and FM 3009. Again, being a pilot and an engineer, directions are important. Yet when you look at the package, it's not the southeast corner of that intersection, it's the southwest corner of the intersection. You can verify that either by the picture showing on the map there, or when you read the meets and bounds, it starts off with a peg that's located in the westerly right-of-way of 3009. It's already on the west side. Then it goes south, it goes west, goes north, and closes with east. Clearly, the whole area is on the southwest corner of Live Oak and 3009. So I might suggest that that be changed. I don't know if that's an amendment, how important that is, but at least I just wanted to demonstrate somebody actually reads your packages here. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And next signed up this evening, Ms. Lunn. Good evening.
You know, I'm at the 805 Arrow Avenue. Then I'm from California. My husband retired from LA City. Then, I'm sorry, I'm not from English.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. Then about 15 years ago, we moved to California to here. Then we bought the house, the Arrow Avenue house. Then I want to make a business, so me and my husband moved to San Antonio. Then that house, my son lived by himself, but his disability, he's schizophrenia, so you know, I think we have a neighbor burglars. About 5 years, whatever I bought his house, microphone I bought, or some table I bought, everything they steal from his house. But I was very busy, and my husband's very sick all the time. So I just once a week come down here, buy his food, grocery. You know, I bought his food. Then this year, January 7th, my husband passed away. So I moved to my son's house. Then I take a look at my winter boots, 3 of them gone. Everything I bought, it's gone. So one day I sit down, that's 11:30 at night. I put on the alarm system, and what is that? Video cameras. But that video camera I bought, that was with the computer. When I was young, middle school, high school, we don't have a computer, so I don't know not much at all. So just to put on that video camera, I take a look, watch TV. Then about 11:30, I thought there was a bird, some white hat and a jacket on it and the pants on it. Then I said, "What is this?" Then he go into the pecan tree. We have 2 pecan trees backyard. He walked down there, take a look inside. I didn't put the curtain, so they could see me. Then I thought, oh my God, what is this? 11:30. I thought that was a bird. Then I take a look. Then he saw me. Then he ran, side door. So I go take on the lights on, light up twice. That burglars, I think right now they can't come on in because I have the alarm system, so they cannot came in. And strange thing is, my son, he even later on I die, he cannot have a house because he don't know how to fix those kind of things. So I went to the Soho downtown, some government, some Section 8 house, something like that. Then I've waiting, they sent it to me a form. They never sent it to me a form, so I went down there with my son. What happened to my son's, that program? Then they say, you sent it to me, you don't know, so they already, he has to wait 3 to 6 years. So I didn't send it to them. I didn't receive the, form. So this morning I went to the post office. That happens December. Then this happens why mayor's missing. They say they don't know, but it's strange things. So they want me to buy some locker in the mailbox. So, but I will. And I already fixed his problem. Mail, they touched the mail, and what is that? They touched the mail, and one check was missing to about several months ago. Check was missing, so they even touched it. I know exactly who did. Then neighbors are everybody nice, everybody young people, everybody nice. But one house is very weird. So many, traffics there. A lot of people live there all the time. But when I saw that video camera, just like him, but I can't see the face. It's dark and nice. So I know who that is, but I cannot say you did, because you know what I mean. So that guy, I think their family is burglars, but I cannot say who you did, because what is that? I didn't catch at the time. So this happens to that house. I just city council office knows this problem. Is everybody nice there? But the one house was really weird. People live there. Still, everything, I bought new one. I replacement, microwave or even washing machines. They sketch washing machine. Whatever make me hurt, they did. I don't know why, what reason. I didn't do nothing to, with them. So I just very hurting from them. Probably later on I'm going to sell, but right now that happens to that area. So.
Thank you, ma'am. Chief of Police is here, and if you can share some information with Chief or Mr. Waite. Mr. Waite's walking back toward there. If you can share some information about what you just told to us about which house and the like, I'm sure that they'll take a close look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, and also signed up this evening, Grumpy Zeus.
Mayor, Council, thank you. Just earlier in the meeting, Mr. Gutierrez was awarding a plaque for Operation Comfort. That's one of the subjects I want to talk about this evening. I know they're very good people, and they are on my property, and they did that walk with the blow bonnet. They do a great job for them. A few years ago, they went to Sochi, Russia, and they won the gold medal on the sled hockey. Right now, currently, we're playing in South Korea, and we played Japan. We played the Chucks. We beat them 10-0, a little over 10-0, both times. So we're looking forward to hopefully challenge the Canadian for the gold medal in 17th of March. That's been said, 23rd of April, I've always hold fundraisers for them. That day will be held for them for when they come home with hopefully the gold medal. Silver is good, bronze is good. We're competing. Just keep that in mind, April 23rd. Today, it's been 2 years, 2 months, and 20 days to be exact. We lost a great businessman, Mr. Gutierrez. There is not 1 week, ladies and gentlemen, not 1 week go by in my restaurant without several people. Some ask me, did they catch who did this to your friend? Some ask me, are they getting closer? And disappointingly, some ask me, they'll never catch him. You know, he left a vacuum. I am his friend. He left a vacuum in our city, and I keep asking. We've asked several departments. We put out a reward. We hired PI. There is no closure. The family will never get closure. His friends will never get closure because he's missing. He's gone. But I have this feeling that we failed Henry. We definitely failed him. He was not just murdered. That's what bothers me every day. You know, a lot of people sit up here, and I'm very true to my friends. I'm very true to people. And they have really no idea what that makes you feel like. But if it happens to one of you, if it happens to anyone behind me or to me personally, I would be asking every day where we at with it. 2 years, 2 months, 20 days. You know, some people ask me, is it a cold case? When that time passed, in my opinion, and only my opinion, we're not getting nowhere. And I feel sorry for his family. I feel sorry for me, because I really miss him. This man will come and have dinner with me almost every Friday night. Every Friday night. I'm asking you, and I've asked when I was a council member, for more law enforcement at the time to get involved immediately and to start investigating. That never happened. The answer I got, we do not want to interfere with the police work. Well, that's not what I was asking for. I was asking the more the better. It's your turn. You need to ask those questions. Enough time has gone by. Why don't you put yourself in Mr. Gutierrez's family's home one day? Why don't you put yourself in my home? I got his pictures in my home. I got it at the restaurant. And when I get asked every week, every single week, I get asked that question. What happened to Mr. Gutierrez? I still have his picture. I still have his rewards. But please, I'm asking you, you as a body of this city, to ask the serious questions and get the answers. We want a briefing. We want to know where we at with this case. You know, I talked to Ms. Gutierrez and quite a bit. But if it wasn't for people like us to bring it up, it would be colder than cold. And I'm begging you. You took an oath to protect the people of this city. You have failed Henry Gutierrez. I failed him when I was a councilman. But I did speak. I did ask for help. I remember his family was all sitting up here. And I asked a simple question. Please have the city manager order the chief of police to bring in the Texas Rangers and to bring in the sheriff department immediately to help investigating. Unanimously, I was turned down. That was over 2 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, the next item that we have this evening, we have a workshop, and it's Resolution 18R26, and it's a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the approval of the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2016 to to 2017 and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Walters?
Good evening. Tonight I have the city auditor, Debbie Frazier from Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates, who will go through the annual financial report with you.
Good evening. I'm Debbie Frazier. I'm a partner at Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates. We're a local firm outside of Universal City. The comprehensive annual financial report was gone over with the city management team as well as your audit committee last week, March 6th. So this is going to be much shorter than they had to go through. They're probably very thankful. The comprehensive annual financial report, this is somewhat for the new people on council, but it's made up of an introduction, our report, the management discussion and analysis, governmental-wide financial statements. The governmental-wide financial statements are shown on a full accrual basis. So like any other business, you see the fixed assets, you see the debt, compensated absences, as well as net pension liability. The fund financial statements are how you budget. So you'll see the capital outlay is expensed rather than capitalized. You have the notes to the financial statement, then your required supplementary information, which consists of your budget to actual and your TMRS information. The supplemental individual financial statements and schedules, and then your statistical section. The statistical section is very that's probably the area that most people want to read because it's going to give you 10 years of statistical information about property tax, your assessed values, debt, and those sort of things. And then you have a compliance section. You're required to have a compliance section because every year you go out for the GFOA Certificate of Excellence. And again, in 2016, you received that. The independent auditor's report, we actually follow generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards. As a firm, we have a peer review, which is we're audited by other CPAs. And because we're a governmental firm or prepare governmental reports, that's amped up a little bit. We also were members of the Governmental Audit Quality Control Center. The purpose is to form an independent audit, and on the financial statements, we gave you this year an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion you can get. That's what you look for. A modification usually requires some type of significant deficiency or material weakness. Again, you had none of those. The MD&A is written from your point or the city's perspective. We help you write that, but it gives the financial highlights, the overview of the financial statements, and it's written mainly on the governmental-wide financial analysis type, so full accrual. You do have some budgetary highlights, some capital assets and debt, and then if people want to request information, you can get it in that section. In your governmental-wide financial statements, again, this is your full accrual statements. Your governmental activities make up capital projects funds, debt service funds, general funds, your EDC. No proprietary funds are shown here. So the assets of the city exceeded its liabilities by $106.6 million at September 30th, 2017, and your net position increased by $13 million, and the bulk of that is contributions, capital grants, and receipts from permits. On your business type activities, again, this is your water, sewer, and your EM&S service. So your assets of the water and sewer system fund exceeded liabilities by $90.3 million. Your unrestricted net position increased from $4.5 to $20.2 million at September 30th, and that has a lot to do with capital projects that have been going on in that fund. Your Schertz EMS, you had assets at the end of the year, they exceeded by $890,000, and your unrestricted net position increased by 500, or from 569 to 594,000. This is just the highlight of your governmental activities and business type activities. So again, this is the full accrual statement. You'll notice that your net investment in capital assets is close to $85 million, and your business type activities is $70 million. You have money restricted for specific purposes. You see the economic development has $15 million, and then you have unrestricted net position of $1.6 million in the governmental activities and your business type activities of $20.8 million. In the fund financial statements, again, this is the way you budget, so it's your modified accrual statement. The general fund's fund balance at the end of 2017 was $13 million, and your combined balances were $49 million. We expect this to go down as you spend those capital projects funds. Your unassigned fund balance for general fund was $10 million, or approximately 5 months average operating expenditures. So you guys had set a goal a couple years ago, and you have met that goal. Fund balance for the general fund increased by $1.5 million, and that was basically due to permit fees and service fees. Your combined fund balance increased $10.1 million, primarily to debt proceeds. Here is a breakdown of those fund balances. Basically, the non-spendable type, $98,263. This makes up your inventory, so you don't have that money to spend. And then you have a group of items that are restricted for specific purposes or committed for Civic Center. And then you have assigned for property replacement of $854,000, and you have that unassigned of almost $10 million. Any questions on that?
I don't at the moment. Council, questions at this point? No. Press on.
So your business type activities, this is your water and sewer fund net position. It increased again by $10.7 million, and your revenues included capital contributions of about $6.1 million. This is basically developers give you infrastructure. Your EMS fund, it increased, your net position increased by about $476,000, and it includes transfers to other funds in the amount of $10,000, close to $9.4 million. The budget to actual, this is your general fund only, and you'll find this in your RSI, or required supplementary information. And I just thought you might be interested in knowing that your total revenues were about $800,000 more than you anticipated in your final budget. So you brought in $25,987,000. Your expenditures in the general government, you plan to spend $5.5 million, and you spent almost $5.2 million. So your variance, or your favorable variance, was $334,000. Your public safety, you had budgeted to spend almost 12.5, and you spent 12.2. Streets, I'll go over to the, Streets, you plan to spend 1.2, almost 1.3, and you spent almost that. You were 2,375 short. And I'll kind of skip down to the bottom. Your excess deficiency of revenues over and under expenditures, you actually were positive of 1.4, almost 1.5 million. Again, you had a really good year with permits. You transferred out transferred in 68,000, and then you had a net change in fund balance of $1.5 million, bringing you to an ending fund balance of almost $13 million. The next item is your net pension liability and related ratios. About 4 years ago, GASB, which is our standard setting body, issued a new GASB and required you to put the net pension liability on the full accrual financial statements. And so it also requires us to include this in your report for a 10-year progression. So it started in 2014, and we're just progressively showing until we achieve 10 years. The couple of numbers I'd like you to look at is your net investment income in 2014 was $1.8 million, and in 2015, TMRS made some investment changes, and their target allocation changed. They sold some investments, so they had kind of not a really good year in investments. They only brought in $53,000. After all those changes, this year in 2016, you have $2.6 million in investment income. The planned fiduciary net position, which is the third number from the bottom, you see in 2014 you had 72.5% funded. You dropped a little to almost 70% in 2015, and really the drop was attributable to the net investment income, which you as a city have no control over. And then this year it's back up to almost 72%. The GFOA recommends that you have at least 70%. So you guys are doing well. As you receive a new percent contribution or contribution percentage, that will continue to climb. We do issue a letter of conduct that we went over with the audit committee, and that has your accounting policies, accounting estimates, notes that we feel are important. We like the revenue recognition, the debt, and the TMRS note. So if you're going to read those, or going to read only specific notes, those might be some that you'd like to view. The new notes that you have are service concession agreements and 380 agreements. Those are new GASBs this year, and so they required reporting. We had no disagreements, and we received representation or management representations. The acting city manager and James basically signed over their firstborn. And we had no consultations with other independent accountants, and you were in compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act. Do you have any questions?
All right, very good. Council, questions? Mr. Edwards?
So Ms. Frazier and James, typically you just receive information from the city about the finances, and then you do your audit. Am I correct? So you look at the books from that standpoint.
We test internal controls. We do a variety of things. We go to the different areas within the city and kind of look at your cash management systems, determine risk analysis, and then proceed from there. Determine what we're going to probably look at more.
And if you find an area, that's when you address that issue. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Mr. Gutierrez.
Ms. Frazier, could you share with us the findings with the audit concerning internal controls?
We did have two comments. One was with your TMRS and your GASB 68, you're required to test what TMRS has put in the system. So actually TMRS, you fill out the form, or the employee would fill out the form and send it to TMRS. And TMRS has had kind of been a little scattered in some of their entry, and so that affects the estimate that is actuarial study on an annual basis. So anyway, GASB 68 requires you to sample or test what TMRS has put into the system. So that was one of our comments. You don't have a good procedure right now for testing that. And then we did have some cash issues. You have some kind of stale dated checks that we'd like you to research and decide if they should be sent to the state or if they should be refunded back to the city.
Thank you.
We did have another comment about the animal control, but I'd kind of not like to go into that because we'd probably tell you how to steal. So,
Anyone else? I would encourage anybody that's curious about how the city handles its finances to look at these reports. They're all available online. The last 7 years, if you go back about 7 years and look at some of the comments that were made about things that we needed to improve on, things that we've worked on, things we have remediated, you'll see that we've made a lot of progress. I'd particularly say take a look at pages 94 and 95 if you like looking at statistical measures. A lot of good things there that tell you a good deal about what we're doing in the city. And I went back to 2012. It's roughly 5 years or so ago. A couple of statistics that you can pull from reading this report, one of which is our police staffing is up 16% during that period. Fire staffing is up 22%. EMS staffing is up 17%. Unemployment for our area as a city is, as a function of the unemployment percentage rate, is down 45%. 2,500 new jobs that are identifiable as you go through the report. The tax rate has been lowered 3 times. It's been raised 0 times. Our operating reserves, our reserve position has gone up 390% during that period. And then finally, corporate investment is somewhere close to the $250 million, $250 million that companies have invested in establishing their businesses or building buildings, et cetera, in the city of Schertz. Again, roughly that 5 to 6 year time frame. So if you haven't read through this, it's a long read. It's well over 100 pages, but there's a lot of very, very interesting information. And anyone that hasn't taken a look at these, that's interested in the city's finances, again, take that 7-year view, walk the walk from where we were 7 years ago, and it'll be very interesting and telling for you. All right, council, any other questions, comments? Thank you very much.
I would like to
Please.
thank the accounting department, finance department. We try not to be invasive, but inevitably we are, and probably drive them crazy for a couple weeks, and we're out of their hair for a while.
Yeah. I'll comment on that with you too. You and I spoke briefly as you were wrapping up the audit. One of the things that you did say was that our team was as well prepared this year as any year that you can recall. So congratulations to the team being well prepared, having things ready to go, and essentially simplifying the overall exercise by having everything set up, ready to look at. So well done, Mr. Walters. Appreciate it. And as always, thank you for your help.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
If anybody would like to go over this, I know we went over it with the audit committee, and if you have any questions as a council, you're welcome to call me.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I went over to their office just about a month and a half ago, maybe a month ago or so, and I did not have an appointment, and one of the folks came out, sat down when we walked through the questions that I had. So if you haven't been to their office and spent some time with them, I'd encourage you to do that as well. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Mayor, this is an action item.
Yes, it is. I've already read the caption. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 18R26?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Edwards, a second for Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? If not, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you all. All right, we have a number of things on the agenda here this evening that involve some guests that we have with us. So I'm first going to go from here. I'm going to skip to our consent agenda very quickly and allow the council to kind of dispose of that. And then I'm going to probably rearrange a little bit some of the items that we have so that those that are people that are here for particular items that are guests, we can dispose of those, and then we'll come back and go through. So the first thing I want to take up is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening is item number 1, minutes, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 27, 2018. Item number 2, ordinance 18S10, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the official zoning map by rezoning approximately 1.5 acres of land from single-family residential R1 to office and professional district, or OP. Item number 3, ordinance 18T11, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an adjustment to transfer funds for the operations grant in connection with the A-Smart Restaurant Supply Company performance agreement, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. Item number 4, boards, commissions, and committee member resignations. Approval of the resignation of Ron Washington from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Item number 5, resolution 18R32, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acting city manager to enter into an amended agreement with Physio Control Inc. Incorporated for the lease or purchase of one patient care monitor, defibrillator, and total expenditures with Physio Control Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $80,000 for fiscal year 2017-2018. Item number 6, Resolution 18R31, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the submission of a grant application in an amount up to $92,203 to the Office of the Governor, Homeland Security Division for the 2008 State Homeland Security Grant, or HSGP program, and authorizing the acceptance of the funds upon award. Item 7, Resolution 18R33, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, appointing members to the Alamo Area Council of Governments Regional Emergency Preparedness Advisory Committee and other matters in connection therewith. Any of these that need to be pulled and considered individually?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Edwards?
Actually, one correction. As Mr. Eller stated on item number 2, southwest corner.
Mayor, if I may, it is
Dr. Scagliola?
It is the southeast corner. Live Oak Road ends at 3009. The other side of the street is Dietz. If you look at the orientation of the street itself, it runs northwest to southeast. I don't believe there is a correction to be made.
In either case, Mr. Santee, if we have misidentified a corner or not, is it a material problem if we proceed?
If the legal description on the ordinance that is being passed is correct, that is what we look to. This is for notice, and I don't believe there's any confusion as to what area we're talking about. They also post signs on the property, so I don't.
Mr. James, go ahead.
So yeah, talking to staff, and I appreciate Councilman Scagliola with where the road ends. Yeah, staff feels like they erred that more accurately. If we're trying to describe it for a typical resident who would look at it, they would describe it as the southwest corner. So again, that is an error. So if it could stay on the consent or maybe needs to be pulled, with the note that the ordinance will change to southwest describing the property. I don't think there's an issue in terms of where the zoning was, which Mr. Santee was saying. Nobody was confused about which property was under rezone, so there's not a procedural issue. But again, with the note on approval, we'll correct the ordinance to reference southwest.
So if you're going to, Mayor, I'm sorry, but if we're going to make specific changes to it, let's pull it off of consent and do it separately.
All right, so in that case, item number 2, Ordinance 18S10 will be considered separately. Mr. Crawford, you said you had something you'd like to say?
I'd like to make a request that we take items number 11, Resolution 18R28, and item number 12, Resolution 18R29, and add that to consent agenda, if that's okay with council.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Crawford, a second from Mr. Larson to move items 11 and 12 to the consent agenda. This is procedural in nature, so I'll tell you what. Any other comments, questions from council on that one? Let's go ahead and vote on it as we normally would. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. Motion carries. Therefore, items number 11 and 12 will be now included in the consent agenda. Item 11 is 18R28, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, approving and authorizing sanitary sewer easement agreements along Wiederstein Road from the Schertz Cibolo Universal City Independent School District and San Antonio 1 and San Antonio 3 limited partnerships and other matters in connection therewith. And item number 12, Resolution 18R29, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, approving and authorizing a waterline easement agreement through the Samuel Clemens High School campus from the Schertz Cibolo Universal City Independent School District and other matters in connection therewith. So that would be item number 12, item number 11. And the consent now consists of items number 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, and 12. Is there a motion to approve those items on consent?
Make a motion we approve the consent agenda as stated.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Crawford, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. We will now go back to the items on consent are approved. However, we'll go back to item number 2 at this time, Ordinance 18S10. This is final reading, but we probably need a motion. I'll tell you what, I'll make a motion from the chair that we approve Ordinance 18S10 with the correction to the designation of the proper corner as identified by staff.
So moved.
Second.
So I have a motion from the chair. I have a second from Mr. Edwards. Comments or questions from council? Mr. Santee, will that be sufficient? Very good. Then I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays, the motion carries. All right. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening, I'm going to move to discussion and action items. Item number 8, which is Resolution 18R27, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, appointing Charles Kelm to the Board of Directors, place D2 of the Schertz Local Government Corporation, and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Waite.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This evening we have the opportunity to fill a vacancy on the Schertz Local Government Corporation Board. Mr. Andrew Hunt, who the council put on in 2016, felt compelled to resign his position because he moved out of the city of Schertz. And so because it is the position that we filled, and the CCM may not have been that clear trying to describe how we fill these positions, but it is one that we filled, and so since our candidate is the one that stepped down, we have the opportunity to fill it for the remainder of the term. So it has a little more than 3 years left on it, or almost 3 years on it, going to 2020, the end of 2020. Mr. Charles Kelm, as you can see from his resume, is an Air Force veteran, trained engineer, is working currently in the community as an engineer for a project management firm that is working with schools in helping to do reconstruction and construction projects on individual campuses, really with a focus on less well-off school districts around the San Antonio region. Mr. Kelm originally applied for, after his retirement, I'll back up one. They lived in Schertz while he was active duty and was assigned at Randolph Air Force Base. They left, they kept their house here, and once he retired from the Air Force, came back here to raise their family. He applied for, because of a desire to get involved in the city, the Public Works Director position. He did very well in the first round of interviews that we did with him. Unfortunately, while scheduling the second round of interviews, he determined that the level of commitment of the Public Works Director was probably a little bit more than what he was wanting in a career post the Air Force. And so he appropriately withdrew from the process before we had a chance to consider him any further. But he still expressed at that time, and continued to express, a desire to get involved in the community in some way. And so with his civil engineering background, with his leadership experience, I reached out to him to ask if he would consider this position. It is quite the commitment. It's basically a half a day a month during the day for 5 years. In his case, 3 years, because he's taken over an unexpired term. He was very excited. His work has signed off on him participating with the city in that manner. And so tonight I'd like to ask council if you so choose to nominate or to fill position D2 with Mr. Charles Kelm on the SSLGC board.
Very good. I took some time to do a little research about Mr. Kelm, and both online and otherwise, and quite a career with the United States Air Force, and did not realize that he and I were in the Webster University MBA program in an overlapping year, and I don't remember him in any of my classes. So I'm disappointed we didn't get a chance to meet, but back then. But he certainly looks to be quite capable. Council.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 18R27.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Dr. Scagliola. Comments, questions from council?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Crawford?
Sort of a trivial question, Mr. Waite.
Yeah.
Will he be able to attend the meeting on Thursday and be sworn in?
Yes, he regretted not being able to be here. He had a previous family commitment, but they return tomorrow afternoon, and his plan is to attend with myself, Mr. Greenwald, you, and Jimmy Hooks tomorrow.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? I do have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Going to go in order for one more. Item number 9, Resolution 18R20, a resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acting city manager to enter into a contract with CityView, an unincorporated division of N. Harris Computer Corporation, for software and implementation services for a community development system and other matters in connection therewith. Good evening.
Good evening. So the item before you, again, as it's listed as a community development system, I want to go ahead and preface that at the very beginning that what we're really looking at is something that's going to work citywide for all of the departments that deal with development, the built environment, and even including code enforcement. So what you'll probably see around is a number of staff members who are here from the various departments. We've got some folks from planning, community development, code enforcement, EDC, engineering, parks. I know the fire marshal's floating around somewhere. Just to kind of show how important this is to staff and how much we think it will help benefit the community. So I kind of want to start off with some of the problems that we experience under our current system. So there is, we've got a lot of development processes across the board, and I'm going to kind of blindly say that, but again, it's not just planning and community development. Engineering does permits, public works does permits, fire runs permits, a number of departments, you know, it kind of takes the whole, all the departments to really help build the city. And so one of our first issues is that we've got all these processes. A lot of them are complicated and not very clearly defined. This causes some confusion and surprises for both residents and developers as they come through the process and they say, oh, well, I thought I only had to do this, but now I have to do this too. Because a lot of our processes are a little older. We try to revise them the best that we can, but we are very much still ingrained in a very paper system. Also, these processes are complicated and require a lot of forms to be submitted, and a lot of times those forms are the same forms that carry you through the development process. So it's kind of tracking that. Additionally, development information is not in a centralized repository. So a lot of different departments are each using kind of their own little area, and they've got their own section on our server. We all have our own different way of filing things, which can cause slowdowns and problems as we go through this because the information between various departments, it can be difficult to access, and so I may have to call down to engineering and say, hey, did y'all get this from these people? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, we got it, and it just takes a lot longer than kind of having it all in one place. Additionally, these slowdowns can cause several days added to each submittal. So whenever we do plan review, we're doing all paper plan review. We get big 24 by 36 sheets in various thicknesses depending on the project. So whenever we get that in, it often comes to one specific area who's kind of running the permit, and then it gets distributed out to the other departments. The way that we do that right now is manual routing. So it can be 1, 2, sometimes even 3 days between once we receive it to when that other department is even able to start this review. It's just this very manual process. Then we've got, again, the manual processes in paper hard copies. So this inherently, every single permit that comes into any of the departments has to be manually keyed into the existing software. So oftentimes, developers, residents, folks submitting these permits are already typing them into our awesome PDF hot fillable forms that we have, which is great so we don't have to decipher handwriting, but we're really doing double entry. Errors happen. Because it's hard copies, occasionally, we're guilty of it, plans and permits do get lost in the system, or they get stuck on somebody's desk and underneath something else, and it just starts piling up, and it's like, where did that go? Brian can attest to this as we search through random people's desks, myself included. Additionally, interdepartmental collaboration is slowed down because of the routing. So it's important that we're always all working off of the same versions. And so we may be having a phone conversation between planning and fire or fire and engineering, so on and so forth, that because we have to wait for them to manually get these new plans that we routed, it'll be a day or two before we can really start having that conversation after they've then even reviewed those plans. Finally, we have very limited self-help and online convenience for all of our customers. So developers, home builders, the residents, across the spectrum for permit application, for code enforcement, for all their projects. You know, as of right now, you can submit an inspection request online, which we've managed to work that out through WebQA. Code enforcement, you're able to, again, also submit a code complaint, but there's some issues on being able to track that on the back office side. Additionally, you can't submit online applications. You can't check your project status. So the only way you do that is to call up. I'm sure all of you at some point in time have called Mr. James to say, hey, I got this call from somebody. What's going on in this project? And typically the answer is, yeah, let me call you back. I got to figure that out. And the reason to that is we just don't have a system that really gets us there. So he'll call down to me, or he'll call down to Kathy or Gil and say, hey, where are we at on this project? And oftentimes the answer is, hey, let me find out and call you back. So again, it's not in a localized, centralized location that we can just go to. So with that said, I'd like to go over some of the solutions that this City View has provided. And so we did go through a long RFP process. This has been a several-year item, especially for those council members who've been on council for several years. You've seen us rebudget for this, so on and so forth. So we really kind of did the research, seen what was out there, created this RFP based on it, so we had some background knowledge. And as a result of the RFP, we've selected that City View is the best qualified candidate to meet our needs. And so some of the things that they're going to do via their solution is provide clarification and ease in development processes. So what I've got up here real quick is these are all actual real-life screenshots from their program. This is from the customer web portal. Again, it's from their demo site, but as you can see up at the top, it's like checking out at Amazon. You just go through each individual step. It's going to tell you exactly what you need to fill out. It's going to custom cater the forms to you. You're only going to enter once. And then as soon as you click submit, however long that email takes to get it to us, 30, 45 seconds, it's in our system ready to go, already ready to start processing. There's no couriers that need to run down plans, anything like that. So it does really help provide a lot of these very easy, clear steps to follow as we get through this. Additionally, through the configuration of this software, we will be completely evaluating and overhauling our business processes. So we're working currently on this paper system, and it kind of works as a paper system, but we don't want to carry that system into the digital world because it may not be the most efficient. So one of the items that they even offer is a little bit of best practices to kind of help give us some guidance and work with us through that to really pick good processes. Next, convenience to the customer. So again, here's another snapshot of the customer portal. At this time, we are not proposing to pick up animal licensing or business licensing, but all the other items, I believe, are included in there, as Lewis shakes his head yes. So this is what you would see as a resident who wants to submit a new code enforcement complaint, or even potentially search an existing complaint, as a developer or a builder who needs to apply for different development permits. Even neater than that is you can do everything. You can apply for permits online, you can file code complaints, you can pay fees. The neat one is you can check your project status. So this particular client has multiple permits and applications in, and it even shows the historic ones, and I'll kind of leave that up as I'm talking so y'all can look at all the neat things. And this is what the customer sees. And so customers can even receive emailed notifications when they hit certain application milestones. So your review's been completed and we have no additional comments. That email got sent out to the property owner or whoever was listed on that application. This online portal is so convenient that residents can apply for permits or file code complaints from home or from work. They don't have to take off time to come into City Hall to sit down and talk to us and do all of that. Additionally, the home builders and development community can go through the entire process from annexation all the way through certificate of occupancy. The entire thing they can do without even stepping foot in City Hall. So they can do it from the office, from the job site, they can track all their applications. And this is really going to help us improve customer service. Additionally, it's automation and centralized data. And so what you're looking at here is an example of, this is the back office side, so staff would see, but this is just a random property that was selected, and you're seeing all the legacy data. So these are various permits, code cases, even the plat applications that are all tied as related cases to a specific geographic location, because it even ties in with our GIS department and all the ESRI items. Sorry, I left you out earlier, Tony, my bad. It is very much heavily ingrained in GIS. So folks are able to either start permits or code complaints from, knowing the address, or perhaps you don't know, and you call up Brian and say, oh, there's some work going on, and I don't remember exactly where it is along 3009, but it's, next to the cleaners, but kind of 2 doors down from that. And you're like, oh, okay. And Brian can get on while you're talking to him on the phone, look it up and say, oh, yeah, it's this property. Here's
It's on the southeast corner.
Exactly, the southeast corner.
I know.
Additionally, it will really help us with, all the automation is really going to help with error reduction because we are very paper processed right now. We're all human. We make errors. By the reduction in keyed entry, because folks will apply online, that information is just carried into the system. No need for modification. Additionally, it all works off of the step process for each permit. And so as I get through the different parts, it's going to prompt me to what the next step is. It'll also inform the customer as they go through this what the next steps are. So you always know, where am I at in my project? Just real-time data. Additionally, we plan that this will improve project timelines immensely because we're looking at doing digital plan review as well with this. And so every time people are submitting digital plans, instead of that 1 to 2 day routing period, it's almost instantaneous. We make sure that they actually uploaded a plan of what they were doing and didn't accidentally submit a picture of their really cute dog instead, just on accident. Make sure that's good, click it, and it will just send it out to all the departments, immediately pop up on their dashboard to say, hey, you've got a new task to do. Finally, the centralized data repository will allow all of the departments to really access and see what permits are going on, what permits have been previously issued. Are there open code violations? Are there things that prevent us from moving forward with various projects? Have they pulled their clearing and grading permit before we issue the building permit? So on and so forth, just immediately at a glance for any user of the system, on staff side. Finally, there's much needed code enforcement improvement. So as the citizen survey came back, code enforcement was a big issue there. Staff felt it was very important when we first started looking at this stuff. It was very centralized to just planning community development. We started realizing, wait a second, the best way to go about this is a much bigger holistic perspective. And then we even, with our limited budget, said, hey, go ahead and bid it with code enforcement and without code enforcement. Let's see what this is really going to cost us, because it was so important to the community via the citizen survey that we wanted to go ahead and include it. And so the proposal to this evening is to even include the code enforcement module. And so some of the things that will help with code enforcement, and this is a little snapshot of just the mobile app that works on a variety of mobile devices, including the Microsoft Surfaces that they have, as well as the city-issued smartphones. There's a whole bunch that they can do. They can access their to-do list, so they already have a list of inspections that they've got to do. They can look up contractors. They can look up projects, search permits, search planning issues, do just property searches. They can start new code cases from the field, and all of it will immediately upload in real time back to the main office, and they can also pull down whatever's at the main office to their device. So it's a back and forth active sharing, and with the exception of a few very small locations in South Schertz that I'm aware of, we pretty much get self-service anywhere, and so they're able to really keep that tied-in network. So they don't have to come back and forth from the office. They can really help patrol their districts and spend more time out in the field doing inspections, boots on the ground, getting compliance. Additionally, it'll allow customers to kind of track their complaints. That's been one item that we know about is when you currently submit through WebQA, yeah, we get it. Sometimes it has to be dispatched out into a couple other places, and so not everybody has access to that. If somebody calls in and says, well, I put in 2 code complaints for the same thing. Nobody's doing anything about this. Did y'all even get them? So if you log in, as long as you don't do it anonymously and you log in, it'll let you track your complaint. Yeah, there's not always the most information because they have rules and laws that they have to comply with as they do these investigations, but it'll let you know, yep, we've received it and it's under investigation. And then as we get through closeout and those kinds of things, they're able to really interact with the customer on a much better level with much better exchange of information. Finally, we feel that overall this is really going to improve our customer service experience, timelines, which is great for developers, as well as just knowing how the development process works in the city. Because as Brian will attest to you, some of the things that developers want to know is, what are all of my costs? It's not even so much always how much are they, as much as did you identify all of them, and how long is it going to take me to get through this process? Because that's how I'm going to run my pro formas and say, this project works like this, or no, it doesn't. And the last thing that we want to do is get through the process where we quoted them originally, yeah, it looks like it's going to be a $500,000 project, for all your stuff or whatever it costs. And then, oh wait, there's this fee, and we forgot about this thing, and so on and so forth, and now it's significantly more expensive. We've added 20% to the project. what is it going to cost? And I know that's the big question that we've got. So a little bit about what I want to explain in the numbers here. The total projected cost over 5 years is $714,086. This includes everything needed for implementation as well as all of the support and maintenance for 5 years. Okay? The contract for the resolution that's in front of you this evening is for $629,586, and it includes everything we need for licensing implementation, as well as all of those maintenance items for that 5 years. The difference in those numbers that you'll see are these start items at the bottom as I go into the year one expenses. So year one expenses are going to be $523,766, and out of the contract, that's going to include all the licensing, implementation, the first year of maintenance. The other items that we have on here are the server hardware upgrade, as well as some user hardware upgrades, so bigger monitors to do that digital plan review, because sometimes you need 2 monitors and one just doesn't work. We need a little bit bigger. So there's a little bit of money in for that, and then an encode customization for us to make the financial packages work together. And so that, again, the server hardware item, as Miles can answer questions for, is something that was budgeted in the IT budget, and as stated in the staff report, this will be the first project to be put into that server virtualization. So with that, I'll be quiet and let you ask questions. We've got folks here. This is Louis Googe as well, our City View representative, and he's happy to answer any questions about the program and what it does, and Miles can also help out as well.
All right, very good. Mr. Edwards?
So I want to make sure I have this right. You're going to streamline the process, add office efficiencies, improve customer service, not take the personal touch out of customer service, and not include animal services.
Yes, there's no animal service at this time, so what we did is we looked at what is the most used items kind of for that built environment. Those other items are things that can be added on later.
So is that the process? Are we looking at adding that on later?
It's always a possibility. It's one of those things. We haven't explored that, so we don't know if that module meets the needs.
So to be perfectly clear, we are not looking at things beyond that at this point. I think what I would say is, and Bryce didn't mention this, the implementation is not quick. It's 9 months to a year. Once we start seeing how this works and improvements, we may be coming back to try to achieve the same things with others, but haven't gotten there yet.
I like to see that you guys are adding all of the synergies together, so good deal. Thank you.
Others? Mr. Davis?
You mentioned here that the 523 or the 629,586 includes the first year maintenance. Is there expected maintenance cost for years 2 through 5? And what is the expected annual maintenance cost for each year?
Sure. So out of the, and maybe I can get it up here for everybody. All right, so this is the budget that was included with the council packet. And so what you'll see here is, and let me get a little further, here are years 2 through 5, the annual maintenance cost to carry that software. That would be budgeted in future budget years to be included into IT's regular program software budgets that they have for all of the various softwares and programs that we have.
Okay, and then this is an amount of money that covers a 5-year period. So we're beyond the 5-year part. We'd be looking at about a $50K a year for maintenance. And then what is the license cost per year going beyond the 5 years?
So it's just the maintenance, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Unless you buy additional.
Unless you buy more modules. Okay.
Yeah, and as the city grows and as personnel grow, the licensing model is done on a concurrent model. So I believe what we have quoted in here is 31 licenses, which means that 31 people from staff from throughout the city can be logged in using it at the same time. So as we increase staff numbers, so on and so forth, we may pick up additional licenses there, a couple thousand, but we would include those with new employee costs as that gets presented with budget.
Mr. Larson.
Can you give me kind of high-level overview of what the maintenance includes? And is this software as a service, so as the program is upgraded, that's included in the maintenance, or?
Sure. I'll let Louis cover that one.
So can you say that question?
Louis, if you would.
Well, yeah, I guess I want to have a general idea of what that maintenance covers, but most specifically, is this software as a service that as the program updates and technology changes, the maintenance includes those updates?
The maintenance does include those updates. The system is not sold as software as a service. It will be installed on servers here at the city and will be maintained by you. We do release updates on a fairly regular basis. Our current schedule is about 6 to 8 major updates per year. There's some service packs that come out in addition to that. And then what we typically see is we see a city of your size that will do a major update. They are cumulative, so everything from any update that we've released in the last few years is rolled right in, and you can update it just at your convenience.
And is the licensing done on a per user, per device, per server? How is the licensing formulated?
There are a number of factors, Scott.
Okay.
For example, there's concurrent users. There's the modules that you purchase. That enables us to be flexible. For example, we have, counties where they are, close to 1 million people, and then it also allows us to work with a city of 6,000 people in the state of Florida.
And so, okay, so I guess I can understand that. And I guess the primary goal of understanding the licensing is if we have to change out a device or there's turnover, we still own that license if the device or the person changes.
That is correct. Because it's a software license, not related to the device.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
And one item just to add to that real quick, the City View itself will be is a browser-based item that is hosted on our servers, so it'll work across any device. The plan review component of this is a separate item that City View carries a gold license for a program called Bluebeam, which is one of the industry standards for plan review markups. It's used in the private sector extensively. We have demoed it a lot. We like it a lot, and they are completely compatible with that, and actually their preferred use for that actual markup. And those will be by device, but those licenses are relatively inexpensive. I think they're $250 or so.
Good. All right, anyone else? Dr. Scagliola?
As I was working on my dissertation, I explored a little bit of the challenges that small business owners have to deal with, especially in the planning department. And one of the recommendations I made was to use technology to aid with the planning, aid with transparency, aid with efficiency. And I'd like to take credit for this initiative, but I think you guys were on this path probably before I made those recommendations. I believe this is a step in the right direction, though. Mayor, would your indulgence like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18R20?
Second. I have a motion from Dr. Scagliola, a second from Dr. Kaiser. Any other comments or questions from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Edwards.
So how many cities are actually using City View in this current region?
A few hundred. The closest city right now, oops. I'm sorry, I have a big voice, so I don't usually worry about it. A few hundred. The closest city right now would be the city of Carrollton, Texas.
Okay. And are they finding that the implementation and optimization of the program is working well for many other cities in the area, or no?
Can you be more specific about what you're asking, sir?
So it's kind of what you put in is what you get out of the system. Am I correct? So
that is correct. There are best practices built into the system, but then those best practices can also be, shall I say, tweaked to meet your unique needs, and there are configuration tools built into the system to allow you to continue to grow and improve what you do on a day-to-day basis.
So implementation is going to be a training session set up by, I'm assuming, Miles, and then filtered out through all the department heads and then the employees as well?
What we do is we usually bring in a couple of subject matter experts from each department. In the initial phase, we configure the system, and then we train all of the staff on how to use the system correctly.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
One of the items that's really unique about this that really hit it off for staff is all of this configuration that they're doing on the back end, they're going to train us on how to do. So as I have items that I'm like, wow, this seems like really awesome. Now I want all of these emails up front. It's just going to send me email notifications. And then 3 weeks into it, I'm like, wait a second, I'm getting 300 emails a day. This isn't working. We will actually be able to we will be trained to go in, modify those workflows to fix that, because the format that they have it in is not a crazy complicated computer language formatting, but looks a lot more like a flowchart or a Visio table. So.
And Bryce, if I may, and Miles, I believe, as part of the researching the software programs, y'all went out and talked to some other cities that had picked up not necessarily City View, but other permitting, and you learned where maybe theirs fell short. Miles, do you want to touch on that a bit, what you kind of learned there?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, one of the issues that we really cared about was usability for our staff. And we looked at and scored actually very highly the user interface and the ability of simplicity for implementation by our staff to use the system. So some of we actually went out to various road trips and visited with people who are using various systems and got a lot of feedback on what to avoid, what works, what doesn't work, how complex the systems were in implementation, and it's one of the reasons why it took us 3 years to get to this point. We're very, very satisfied with the way this system is set up. It's very straightforward, very intuitive for our staff to learn how to use it, but the flip side is that it also provides a tremendous platform for the future for us to grow.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Mr. Crawford?
Mr. James,
Yes, sir.
how many companies do we have making bids on this project?
We had 3.
How many?
3.
And then y'all went to others and checked out things also? Okay, good, thank you. I forgot to ask that this afternoon.
Very good. A couple of the points. The company's been in business since 1982. It was founded by former municipal employees that wanted to find a way to do their job a little bit easier. You can go, if you haven't visited their website, Council, I would recommend it. It's very informative, and you can even go to other websites, do a search on them, and read all kinds of commentary about their software, how it's implemented, how it's used. I'd encourage you to do that as well. I can't wait to get started. I wish we could have gotten started on this 7 years ago. We just weren't there yet. We weren't ready yet. I have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Look forward to getting this online in 3 months. I know it's an accelerated timeline. I got it. All right. I'm still skipping around a little bit. I want to go now to item number 14. Item number 14 is consideration and/or action approving resolution approving a request for historical incentive program. It reads, resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, approving a request for an historical incentive program for the Main Street area grant for 533 Main Street in the City of Schertz, Texas, and related matters in connection therewith. Mr. James?
Thank you, Mayor. You've seen a few of these before. A number of years ago, as the packet indicates, Council, as an effort to revitalize the Main Street area, did a number of things, some amendments to codes, waivers of fees, and one of the things you did was a matching grant program to encourage and incent folks to put money into the buildings that are down on Main Street. And we've done a number of those, and some of those have been residential buildings, others have been commercial buildings, sort of retail and things like that. What we have before you, as the packet indicates, is 533 Main Street. It's the building that Bear Waste was in next to Schertz Bank and Trust. And what's unique about this is one of the things with regard to the Main Street plan and that the Main Street Committee has talked about for a long time are trying to create that unique place, unique to Schertz, where folks can go and have a beer, grab something to eat after work with their families, family friendlies. We have looked at some of the cities around us, particularly what Cibolo has been doing, and frankly have been envious of the efforts that they have made. We are very pleased with this item tonight because of one of those businesses that we look to in Cibolo, the owner who has a connection with Schertz, is looking to open that sort of a business in Schertz. Mr. Marquez is in the audience. I think I laid this out in the staff report. They have been doing some of the preliminary work, are ready to get going, so we've kind of moved them through quickly, are seeking approval tonight so they can go gangbusters on the renovation work. Again, the grant is up to $20,000. It's a matching grant, so he'll effectively pay 20, we'll pay 20, gets $40,000 in work going forward to get that business open. So we are very excited. This one, Historic Preservation Committee approved it, staff's recommending approval, and I'm sure if you have any questions, the applicant would be happy to answer them going forward.
All right, very good. Council, questions for Mr. James?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18R30.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Larson. Mr. Crawford?
A question. And again, we got in a hurry today. The $20,000, does that come from EDC?
It's hot funds.
Okay.
So again, the reason it's in the Main Street area, the reason the building has to be over 50 years is to use the hot funds.
So none of the floodplain stuff applies?
Floodplain stuff always applies in this circumstance. Again, it's they have to comply with that with regard to the value and the improvements and the type of things that they do. Yes, sir.
And there wasn't a way to use part of the money we bonded in 2010 for Main Street improvements?
No, sir. Again, the program was set up to use hot funds, as you know, periodically. If we get lucky and we have more people coming in, we have a large pot of hot fund money. James will come with one of his quarterly budget amendments. We adjust some over to tap into that. But no, the bond funds that we're looking to meet on the 9th on with the community meeting to talk about how we use are particularly for public capital improvements. So again, we have the $1 million from the Main Street bond. We've got the $400,000 we're kicking in from the road bond, and then again tapping into. We've had the joint meeting with EDC to get them to contribute as well. So those funds are not eligible for this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. James said that we were envious of what Cibelo's doing. I just think we want to compliment what Cibelo's doing. That's all. That's what he meant to say, I think.
That said, I have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Folks, we do have a couple of closed sessions this evening, and one of them, our attorney that's going to advise us has arrived. I'd like to move now to item number 19. City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with the city attorney regarding pending or contemplated litigation, particularly GVSUD versus the City of Schertz and GVSUD versus Texas Public Utility Commission and the City of Schertz. At this time, we're going to move into that closed session, and as soon as we're able, we'll come back out into our open session. All right, I've got 6 minutes after 8. This time we're going to go back into open session. Item number 19A is take any action based on discussions held in the closed session under agenda item 19. I don't believe there's any action to take unless council has any correction for me on that. All right, we've dealt with 14, we've dealt with 19. Apologize for skipping all over the place this evening. Lots to do. All right, then we're going to move on now to our regular order following on number 9, going to number 10. Number 10 is Ordinance 18M13. An ordinance of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Schertz, Texas by adopting Chapter 78, Article 7, Roadway Capital Recovery Fees, incorporating land use assumptions and capital improvement plans for such facilities, providing for collection of impact fees, establishing accounts and records of impact fees collected, providing for the use of proceeds from impact fee accounts, providing for severability clause, and providing for a penalty clause for violations of this ordinance. This is also set for a public hearing. So we're going to have a staff presentation to begin. We'll follow the staff presentation with a public hearing, then we'll open it up to council at that time. So Ms. Woodley, good evening.
Good evening. Mayor, Council, Mr. James. So I was here a few weeks ago and sort of refreshed everyone's thought processes about roadway impact fees, went over some of the policy considerations and the recommendations from the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. So tonight, in preparation for the public hearing that I'm sure you'll open after this presentation, we have Eddie Haas with Friesen Nichols, and he's the engineering consultant that has prepared the capital improvements plan, the land use assumptions, and the capital recovery plan that sets forth and really gets into the calculations and the basis for the actual maximum assessable fees that were determined. So he's going to talk to you and really go through those numbers in a little more depth than we went through. And then he can answer questions. I'm here to answer questions. Mr. James can certainly help with some of that discussion as well. So without further ado, I'll let Eddie take it from here.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are at the culmination of our study regarding the development or the consideration for potential roadway impact fees within the city of Schertz. And we have, as I guess by process perspective, there's been a report that was developed, the final report that was prepared and submitted to the city early January. It was then available to the city staff early February 6th. It was then made available as part of the posting process, made available to the public should anyone require reading it. So all the technical or the legal requirements for posting have been met for the development of this public hearing. Let's see, here we go. So for the general public or those that have not been familiar with the process, an impact fee is really a one-time assessment towards new development for the cost of implementing a specific capital improvements. Those specific capital improvements are those kinds of facilities that are identified in a specific impact fee CIP. That CIP has been documented in the report, and we'll cover that here in a minute. The benefit of the impact fee program is that it's based on travel characteristics of specific land uses. So land uses that generate more demand and consume more capacity of the roadway network can expect to pay a higher fee. The basic premise of the program is that growth should help pay their fair share of cost of implementing the infrastructure that's necessitated to facilitate long-term development of the thoroughfare network within the city. It is a fair and equitable manner in the approach that we've taken, in the sense that we've gone through a technical process to calculate a cost per service unit. In other words, what's it cost to put unit of roadway on the ground? We have a service unit equivalency table that identifies consumption factors based on land uses. So when staff receives a development application, they can say, okay, based on the size of the development, based on the type of the development, the amount of impact that would be put on the network, they can assign the appropriate or the appropriate fee that then the new development would be expected to pay. Not to say that there aren't options or policy considerations that could happen. Developer could implement a road that's on the thoroughfare network, receive credit for implementing some of those facilities that would go against the impact fee levied against the development application. So the bottom line, it gets to the heart of the matter of who's going to pay for growth. We're going to talk about the capital improvements plan, or at least I'll highlight those elements of the CIP, and we're talking about the infrastructure plan. For implementing the thoroughfare is very expensive, and so there's really only two kitties of funds that's going to pay for it. Either new development is going to help pay a fair share of that cost, or the burden then falls on the existing taxpayer to pick up the remainder of that costing. From a legislative perspective, impact fees have been around since the late 80s, early 90s. It's all codified in Chapter 395, Texas Local Government Codes. All the procedural requirements in the technical reports that have been developed to date, those have been complied with. We're now at the policy consideration level where you all will consider if you deem appropriate for implementing roadway impact fees, a collection rate as it relates to a cost per service unit. We'll talk about that here shortly. We have met with a Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. That was your Planning and Zoning Commission. Had at least one member from the banking, real estate, or development community on there. They facilitated comment and feedback throughout the process. We met with them at least 4, perhaps 5 times. The outset of the process, talking about land use assumptions or forecasted growth, talking about capital improvements plans, talking about the impact fee report itself, the cost per service unit, and then ultimately the policy consideration in the letter that they submitted to City Council for consideration of a collection rate. Briefly, I'll hit some of the highlights of the methodological components, and we'll talk about that cost per service unit calculation, some of the benchmarking that went into what are other communities that have impact fee programs, what are they doing by way of collections, so that from a consideration perspective that could be taken into account by you all this evening. What's highlighted in the blue boxes here really kind of covers key areas of the development of the roadway program. All those fueled the development of the study report, where the advisory committee then recommended that report be advanced to you all for consideration of the program. Roadway service areas, 4 service areas have been established for the city. Roadway service areas for roadway impact fees are really confined to the city limits. The purpose of these is that monies collected within these benefit zones that are highlighted in color are collected and spent on projects from that impact fee CIP within that zone. It's to avoid monies being collected on one side of town and spent on the other. But more importantly, it helps to facilitate access or growth that's occurring within that area by those new facilities that are being implemented. Ultimately, the cost per service unit calculation will have a resultant calculation for each one of these service areas because we have an independent calculation running for each. We'll talk about that here in a second. Land use assumptions, as I mentioned earlier, is really, and this is the foundation of the report, how is Schertz anticipated to grow over a 10-year window? We met with the advisory committee on this. We recommended a growth rate of about 3.5%, which translates to growth of the community, which is adding about 16,000 persons, a little over 16,000 over the 10-year window. Obviously, that kind of growth to the community is going to generate necessity of need, roadway improvements to support that need. And that 16,000 population is really equivalent to about 5,900 dwelling units residentially. So there's a lot of folks that are anticipated to come to Schertz over the next 10 years. Highlighted here in the box, the 10-year net growth. Also highlighted here is employment. We looked at not only population, we looked at employment growth because those have different travel characteristics and in the creation of demand that's put on the network so that we could kind of quantify that impact for our costing and the cost per service unit calculation. We'll talk about that here in a second. The CIP is based on the recently adopted thoroughfare plan that was adopted last, I believe that was July 11th, 2017. That thoroughfare plan became the basis for how we would look at facilities that would be considered for the impact fee CIP. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that we ought to include all of the facilities in the plan because as growth occurs, if there's only certain facilities identified, then and a developer builds a roadway segment that's not on the impact fee CIP, technically he wouldn't be eligible for credit. And administrative considerations, we felt that let's just put the whole program into the plan. Therefore, as development occurs, they can get the appropriate credits if they are participating in facilities. There are some requirements on what can be considered. Basically, any arterial or collector class facility that's on the program can be included, and that's what in fact was included in the CIP. The land use assumptions, a land use equivalency table, we use those two. In that forecast, that 10-year forecast, we use those two to generate 10-year VMT. That's the service unit that this program is predicated on. That VMT helped or established the amount of capacity that would be needed within each of the service areas and then ultimately set the stage for our cost per service unit calculations. In the graph here depicted behind the box there, all those facilities that are highlighted in red are facilities from your thoroughfare plan that are in the impact fee program. Those are facilities that are aimed at completing basically where you are currently from a thoroughfare perspective to the ultimate thoroughfare standard in the thoroughfare plan. Facilities specifically excluded in the analysis were facilities like 3009 Roy Rogers, the extension of 3009, the expensive bridge crossing. 3009 was built by other agencies. Obviously, we can't collect on monies paid by other agencies, so we felt that because that was paid for by TxDOT, we're going to exclude that. But then, obviously, the 3009, that very expensive bridge, was something that probably wouldn't happen within the next 10 years, maybe even longer. So we felt like let's just start the program without it. If it makes the list, or if it were to be built all of a sudden, we can always come back and include that cost, but felt that appropriately so, we should not include that facility. Schertz Parkway was also excluded because that facility was already built with other funds. So what the table depicts here is really a summary by service area of the vehicle miles of capacity that's going to be necessitated by growth over the next 10 years. The middle column talks about how much net capacity is being provided by the CIP. In other words, all those roads and the number of lanes that are going to be put on the ground, they're providing vehicle miles of capacity. The far column on the right talks about how much of that capacity that's being made available will be consumed over that 10-year window. In other words, that cost necessitated by growth, that's what we're going to consider in the cost calculation. Speaking of costs, we did some costing conservative approach that was undertaken, looking at construction, engineering, right-of-way, debt service was also included in our costing. We'll talk about that in the number crunch. All the associated costs to put roadways on the ground. And that is to the section per your thoroughfare plan. So your arterial streets have 4 to 6 lanes of facilities with sidewalks. It's the costing to put those facilities on the ground. We did take a conservative approach because in the end, as projects are being implemented, those actual costs are plugged into those planned or estimated costs that we provided up front by a service area basis in the next 5-year update. If there is greater than a 10% difference, it puts the city in a potential refund situation. We want to avoid that. So we've always taken a conservative approach as it relates to costing. Okay. So by way of summary, as it relates to the CIP, we had 40 some odd projects identified. Those are in tables 14 and 15. On page 29 and 30 of the program, you'll see the listing of the projects. The appendices have the individual cost sheets. But this table really summarizes the capacity that's being made available and how much is going to be consumed long term. Column 1 is how much capacity we're going to need based on the 10-year forecast. Column 2 is the cost of those facilities. This is the total cost of facilities of putting on the ground. Column 3 represents the costing that's already lost due to traffic already out on the system. Column 4 is the net cost of the CIP. Column 5 is what we're going to be considering in the cost calculation. So to kind of summarize the total system, not to talk about each service area individually, the column 2, the total cost of the CIP is $229 million. That's to put all the roads on your thoroughfare network on the ground. Okay? But because there's already traffic out on some of these roads, kind of chewing away some of that capacity, that's about $31 million that we're not including in the cost calculation, leaving now from 229 down to $198 million that could be considered in the cost calculation. But based on the amount of growth or the amount of capacity we need from the land use assumptions, we really only need $80 million of that CIP. So we'll start with $80 million that we will need over the 10-year window. Only that cost is being considered. The other cost is excluded now, but that capacity being made available in the CIP can be used in future system updates. We went through another analysis looking at, so we have the cost of putting those facilities on the ground. That's in the cost attributable is column 1. That's the same column from the previous slide. But because there's debt service associated with financing those facilities, we did a debt service analysis, calculated the cost. There was an approach as it related to the amount of potential bonds and how the thing might be funded over 3 bond series and at an interest rate of 3% and a rate of return being capped. We calculated how much debt service would be associated with putting these facilities on the ground. The law says we can consider it, so we have included it in the program. So if you look at service area 1, $22.5 million of needed CIP, the associated debt service 2.7, add the two together, that's the total cost attributable to growth. Within that finance analysis, there was also a credit analysis that was conducted. In other words, developers may be putting roads on the ground, raising the ad valorem value of their property. The city gets that benefit. The developer should get credit for that increase in ad valorem tax. So there was a CIP credit analysis that was conducted, netting out that increase in value to leave a conservative costing in that far right column highlighted in yellow. So of the if I sum up column 1, there was $80 million of cost attributable to growth. We had debt service that sums, all 4 of those columns or rows sums up to about $9 million. That's $89 million in column 3. That credit analysis that we're going to take out of the cost calculation because of the net increase in ad valorem taxes totals to $33 million, so 89 less column 4 of 33. That means we're starting with only $56 million. So you can see we're starting high level, $200 million of costing. We only need a certain amount of that capacity. We've got to consider credit. So of the $200 million, we're considering right now in this cost calculation about $56 million system-wide. We are, again, as I alluded to earlier, we calculated that unit cost that's highlighted here in this table to a cost per service unit by service area. That's how the program works. So as development comes in the north side of town, service area 1, there's a cost per service unit associated with that, and then that's how fees can be derived. So what this table highlights is 2 things. 1, what does it actually cost to put those facilities on the ground? This is that credited cost, the $56 million if you think about it. What's the cost of putting those facilities on the ground? I'm sorry, the total cost, and then there's the credited cost in the far right column. So the far right column is the maximum that can be considered if you are assessing new development and impact fee. Okay? You can see that because each service area was calculated based on individual CIPs or by service areas, the costing or the resultant cost per service unit varies. Okay? And this is a straight technical calculation. So what that does is it then set the stage for the advisory to discuss policy. Okay, we have these 4 different cost per service units. How do we want to consider in terms of assessing new development and then ultimately collecting from new development if you implement the program? So with the advisory committee, and it's highlighted here in this column here, those same cost per service unit, the credited cost per service unit. The advisory committee took 2 approaches. They wanted to, number 1, they wanted to have a collection rate for residential and a separate collection rate for non-residential so they could consider each one of those separately. Secondly, they wanted to consider, well, we have a new program that's in place. We want to consider slowly increasing the program from the date of inception to by year 5, it's at a higher collection rate. The idea there was to be developer-friendly. We have a new program coming in place. You know, fees for non-residential development would be at a lower rate than for, but we're highlighting here in the table, years 1 through 3 at a cost per service unit of $100 per service unit, and then years 4 and 5 increasing it to $175. So you think, okay, 100 here is in the gray area. That's the maximum that you can consider collecting. So a very conservative approach was taken in a collection rate. We'll talk about how a fee gets calculated here in a second. So we have a non-residential collection rate of starting out $100 a service unit and slowly increasing to $175 by years 4 and 5. In the residential component, because there's a higher demand for residential, that demand would then be translated into the network. The thought was that we start with a little bit higher collection rate at $600 for the first 2 years, and then over years 3, 4, and 5 slowly start increasing that. Okay. So what I'm talking about is cost per service unit, and so what does that really mean? So let's kind of walk you through how is a fee derived, right? Talked about it. You have a developer that comes in. He's bringing in a certain size of development, 500 single-family dwelling units, 50,000 square feet of office. You have a size of development times a service unit generation, or that equivalency table that generates demand. How much demand the development's going to create, vehicle miles of demand by the development. And then because we've calculated the cost per service unit, we can then calculate the fee. So by example, we'll have 2 calculations here. New development located in the city limits within Schertz, with a roadway collection rate of $600 a vehicle mile for residential and $100 a vehicle mile for non-residential. So in the case of one single-family residence, just so it's kind of scalable in your mind, one single-family residence has a service unit generation of 3.3 vehicle miles. This is Table 7 of the report, the equivalency table. So there's a demand placed on the network of 3.37 vehicle miles. If there's a collection rate of $600 a vehicle mile, here's your impact fee, $2,000. Okay? 20,000 square foot, the independent variable in terms of assessing is on a per 1,000 square foot basis. So 20 units times the equivalent for office development, 20,000 square feet of office, there's a demand of 113.8 vehicle miles. At a collection rate of $100, here's your impact fee, $11,380. Just by way of example. So the next step was to say, okay, we've calculated the maximum we could collect. There has been a recommendation by the advisory committee of let's start low, let's start conservative, slowly ramp it up. So the next step was, well, let's kind of see how that might compare to what other communities that have impact fee programs in place. How does that play into the overall the impact? So what we've done in a couple of graphs here that I'm going to show is compare in this case the cost or the actual impact fee of one single family residence in Schertz relative to other communities in and around the area. We have Waxahachie, Midlothian, we have Lockhart, Cibolo, College Station, New Braunfels, Port Aransas, and Taylor. So what's highlighted in let's say let's start with Schertz here in the column. The highest that on average, because we had four service areas, we just said, all right, what's the average of the four, just for comparative purposes. On average, you could collect $5,403 for one single-family residence in Schertz. The advisory committee said, well, you know what, we're going to do this ramping thing, where in year one we're only going to collect $100, so that's $2,022 in years 1 and 2, and then slowly ramp it up. So you can see that's highlighted in orange, what's the recommended collection rate. How does that compare to other communities? You can kind of see basically the collection of fees for one single-family residence in Schertz relative to these other communities. We do know that in College Station, we are highlighting this specifically because they have also done a tiered approach. Their current collection rate is $1,500. It's anticipated that it's going to go a lot higher. Don't know that it's going to go up to the $8,800, but they're anticipating that it is going to increase, just by way of comparison. So we wanted to take a couple of other land uses. That's a residential land use. We wanted to look at some non-residential uses in that different collection rate. Here is 20,000 square feet of general office. Here's the maximum that could be charged on average, $182,000. Very conservative approach that was taken at that $600 a service unit. $11,380. Here is the actual impact fee for these other communities that's highlighted earlier. You can see that highlighted in the orange. Taking a look at 10,000 square feet of shopping center. This is small strip center, something that's scalable in your mind. 10,000 square feet of shopping under the advisory committee collection rate would have an impact fee of $4,200. Could be as high as, on average, $67,000, but how does that stack up to the other communities? And then finally, 100,000 square feet of warehouse. 195,000 is the maximum average. Proposed collection is 12,200 relative to some of the comparative cities. So you can see that while the residential is a little bit higher, the non-residential is very conservative in nature as part of this approach. That's the starting point for your consideration in terms of a collection rate, is that letter, but it's a place for starting as part of your policy consideration. So again, what the advisory committee wanted to do was they wanted to have a uniform rate, primarily for ease of not only one, administrative ease, it's uniform across the board, but then two, you wouldn't have, developer in service area 1 having a different rate, higher or lower rate than service area 2. You wouldn't have those across the street kind of arguments. So they felt the uniform across the board approach was taken, or would be best applied here in Schertz. They did like the idea of a residential and a non-residential. They did like the idea of an incremental increase. And there's also the ability for, under special considerations, that you can change that collection rate. They recommended a certain collection rate over a certain number of years and that breakout, but it can be something different per your direction. So I've highlighted quite a few things, not only the derivation of a cost per service unit, how it gets applied, that's all the straight technical, the policy recommendation by the advisory committee, and then now it's going to come to you for consideration if you were to consider implementing roadway impact fees and Schertz. So what I wanted to do is stop right here. I do have some other slides going forward regarding next steps in the ordinance. But I wanted to stop here for any questions you might have regarding technical derivation, regarding any policy considerations that were broached during the plan process.
Gotcha. So is the remainder of the presentation really around implementation and germane to moving forward, or is it germane to, in other words, if we tonight were to decide that we weren't going to do this, then this would be moot?
That's right. Well, what we're saying here is really the next step is the ordinance, and staff has prepared a draft ordinance for consideration by way of procedural. So if there's been the public notice for this impact fee hearing, there's been a recommendation by the advisory committee. If for some reason you all felt tonight that there's just no way you can come to a solution or a recommendation in terms of a collection rate, you might want to consider holding open the public hearing if it's something that could be considered. If we close the public hearing, you have to get the process done, the ordinance adopted within 30 days. You'd have to repost if you wanted to open a public hearing. So you might want to leave it open to a date specific if there's the need to discuss this further.
Okay. The reason I was asking, just to make sure there was no other content that we should have presented before I open the public hearing.
That's correct, no.
Okay.
It's all there.
All right, very good. So anything else from staff on this one? No? All right, so at this time then we'll open up the public hearing. What I'd ask if anyone that would like to address the council on this matter, that you come forward, that you state your name and address for the record. We ask that you keep any comments to around 3 minutes, but as the chair, I've got a little bit of leeway. So at this time, we're going to open the public hearing. Anybody who would like to address us on this matter may come forward and do so.
Good evening, everyone. Glenn Outlaw, 3729 Forsyth Park. I just wanted to give some input. I'm aware of the council's concerns about increasing the cost, the price of a single-family home here in Schertz. And in previous discussions, I also share that concern of trying to keep Schertz an affordable place to live. But I think something else to consider is the cost of owning a home. The purchase price is just one piece. You get a mortgage and you start making payments, and that's, that it's kind of done. But the other piece to owning a home is property taxes. And what you've seen here in the roadway impact fees it is a way to lessen that tax burden on all the taxpayers of Schertz, the existing and the new people. And all I'm saying is if we choose not to do this, and we're going to take that whole $229 million and drop it on the taxpayers, you're now increasing the cost of trying to own a home in Schertz, whether for everybody in the city. Versus if you implement these roadway impact fees, yes, there's an initial upfront charge to the new homeowner, but you take the long look, theoretically, you'd keep his property taxes a little bit lower than if he also then, instead of paying the fee, had to share some of this higher tax burden down the road. And look at, I was fortunate. I moved to Schertz almost 30 years ago, and there were 10,000 people here, and it never crossed my mind that me buying the house and moving in with my wife and 2 kids, I never thought about what kind of impact that was going to have on the city. But as I've watched Schertz grow and become a very popular place to live, what I notice, while our commercial folks do have some impact on us, and probably Walmart, H-E-B are good examples. When you try to go up there, there's a lot of traffic. By and large, I think most of the traffic issues we're seeing today are because of the residential development. Unfortunately, in some places, it's not just our residents that are clogging the road, it's the neighbors, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we used to have a tool, and staff talked to you about it. You know, there was a time when a developer, as part of his development, we required him to improve roads, and the legislature took that tool away from us. So now we're looking at roadway impact fees, and again, I understand the concerns about the price of the new house, but I think you also owe some consideration to those folks that are already here and what the potential is for their tax liabilities in the future if we don't do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
Good evening again. Richard Elder, 4317 Willow Oak. I think it's important that have a mechanism to pay for the roadways that go into a new development, certainly, and also the impact of that additional traffic on the existing major roadways. And to be honest, I didn't review this particular part of the package. It was a bit eye-watering, but it almost sounds a bit voodoo. Because I would say, let's take an example of the Amazon warehouse and run that through this calculation. I think what would come out would be so eye-watering that it might be a deterrent to bringing a facility like that in, if it is a simple formula that seems to be broadly applied. So I would suggest that perhaps there be a little bit more refinement to that to bring the cost, I think, a bit more realistic, because some of these and what they could go to, quite honestly, are pretty eye-watering. That'd be my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, doesn't look like I have any takers. So go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, and we'll open up to council. Council questions. Mr. Larson.
So the first thing I want to say is I have a little bit of a mea culpa. I came out pretty aggressively against the roadway impact fees, and philosophically I think I'm still there. But I've really tried to keep an open mind, hearing from residents and hearing from other people who have kind of been through the process. I don't think it'd be an exaggeration to say I've spent hours with the plural on the phone with Mr. James. I met with members of planning and zoning, members of the CIAC, members of economic development, and I've done an incredible amount of research, much to my wife's chagrin, staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning, reading studies on how this has impacted other communities, and those who are passionately in support of this may not love the degree to which I come to my mea culpa, but I can say that I don't hate the idea as much. I think there is a real possibility that this might be a necessary evil. That being said, I still do have some significant concerns. And I don't know that they're necessarily specific to solely the implementation of the roadway impact fee, but more to the holistic approach. And first off, I want to be very clear. I think that staff, the committee, have done an exceptional job. Every rock I turned over, they have already turned over. So I want to thank them for the work that they've done. And as I've sat down and I grilled the people from committee and I grilled staff and I asked for documentation, I received it, and the amount of thought that's gone into this has been incredible. So I want to thank the staff for that. And as I look at this and I see the growth that we have in Schertz and the need, the number one need is investment in infrastructure, I do say that as I've tried to keep an open mind, this might be a need for the community. I'm not willing to say that it certainly is, but I certainly think that there's a very valid and strong case that can be made that this is a need for the community. But one of the problems and the concerns I have is I feel like the committee really did a good job of doing their job, and I feel like the staff has really done a good job of doing their job, and due diligence has been put into it. And I don't think council's done a poor job of doing their job. I just think we need more time to have a policy discussion about what all of these assumptions, what all of these reports, what all of these recommendations mean, and what does that mean as it relates to the other policy goals and the other goals we have for the future of Schertz. And when we look at a capital improvements advisory committee's recommendation, when we look at the master thoroughfare plan, when we look at the $219 million of proposed capital improvement projects, and we look at the 10-year window and the projected growth and all of the other projects that we have, all the other initiatives that we have, all the other goals that we have, the first question that we should be saying is, okay, how much of this is realistic? What percentage of this are we going to do? Because the reality is saying that we're going to do 100% of what the perfect master thoroughfare plan says is not realistic. It's not sustainable in a fast-growing community. And we have to look at it and say, okay, if we do this, this is going to achieve this goal, but how is it going to impact the other goals that we have? Here's an example of one of those ideas. So right now, currently, I believe the average cost of a new home built in Schertz is around $285,000. I might be off on that. Don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert. I'm not a real estate agent. But that's my research has shown is around $285,000. When we start to begin to implement these impact fees, the cost of new construction is going to go up. That's not an opinion. Every study I've read about impact fees says the cost of new homes go up. Now, I will take a little diversion here because I think it's important as we understand the true cost of what we're doing. A lot of the conversation is, hey, developers are going to pay their fair share. Our new development's going to pay their fair share. Well, the studies don't reflect that reality. That doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do, but we should understand the reality. The studies of other communities said that two things typically happen. First, the price of undeveloped land decreases almost to the dollar of what we're going to be charging for impact fees. That's happened in many communities because the developer, they're not simple. They understand the true cost of development, and that's going to go into their cost of acquisition. Interestingly enough, in addition to that, the cost of a new home being built, the price of a new home being built, typically goes up about half of what's assessed for the impact fee. So these studies have shown in communities that have implemented the impact fee time and time again that the two people that are paying the cost are going to be the people who already own the land and then the people who purchased the new home. Another interesting thing to consider is they're actually paying 1.5 times the new cost. So the developer's not paying a fair share. That cost is being transferred, and that's something to consider. Now, a positive on the flip side is it's still a user-based fee. Users-based fee, they are more equitable generally. It's better than just straight ad valorem taxes. But I think as we decide as a council, and we keep an open mind about the realities of what we're doing, that we take an honest assessment of what this cost is going to be. We can say all day long the developer's going to pay their fair share. That's not entirely true. That's not what the studies of other communities have implemented have been. Now, does that mean it's the wrong thing to do? No. But we should consider that reality. I think another reality we have to consider is this idea that it's a one-time fee. Well, that's not entirely true either. If I have a neighborhood where the average cost of a home is $100,000 and a new neighborhood develops next to me where the starting price is $500,000, what do you think is going to happen to the appraised value of my home? It's certainly not going to stay stagnant. It's going to increase as the community increases. And that'll reflect in your tax bill as well. That's a real cost. Now, some of these things are immaterial. They're tiny little nitpicking things, but that's not the ultimate concern I have as we review the policy of what council is going to do. Is I think of a community that we're already at $285,000 for a new home in the ground, which I think is higher than our other communities next to us. And as we begin to grow the impact fees, as we begin to grow some other fees that we have, and the prices of homes that developers are willing to build goes higher and higher, what happens if the average cost of a new home built in Schertz is $450,000? Well, there's a lot of benefits the community can have from that. But the question I'd ask is, what happens when the next Amazon is looking to move here? And they're going to bring 400 primary jobs with an average salary of $60,000, $65,000. That'd be a really great economic development for the city of Schertz. But do you think that corporation's going to take into account that their employees aren't going to be able to afford to live in the community they're looking to develop the building in? And what happens in 10, 15 years when it's time to reevaluate the real estate for the companies that are already here, who are providing hundreds of primary jobs with an average salary of $50,000, $60,000, and all their employees are commuting? Is that going to impact the investment that we've made in the manufacturing sector? Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but that's a discussion that I think council needs to have, because if our goal is to build this economic development and our goal is to pay for infrastructure, and we come to a solution that helps us pay for infrastructure, but it makes it harder for us to pursue our economic development goals, we need to be considering that and having that discussion. We can't just leave it to the committee's 2 years of work and say, okay, it's done, because their goals and their vision of what's coming next is very different. I think that another concern I have is these fees do tilt the scale against small businesses. Now, we need infrastructure. Small businesses need infrastructure. I called the chamber, and they basically said, look, it's a cost of doing business, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? It's a cost of doing business, and these impact fees and paying for infrastructure is part of that. But when we tilt the scale, the question about Amazon is very valid. When they come and they look and they see the impact fees, will that impact their decision? Well, the answer is probably not. And the reason it's probably not is because the Economic Development Corporation is authorized by state statute to give them an economic incentive, and that economic incentive would factor in the additional cost of impact fees. But when your next door neighbor is looking to develop a business, they're not going to get that same consideration. And so I think that's an overcomable objection. I think that the council can take other policies in conjunction with implementing a roadway impact fee that could help offset the tilting of the balance. But I'd hate to say, oh, that's a real problem, but we'll address it later. Let's get this done. I think part of the challenge I have is that this needs to be a holistic discussion that reviews what of the recommendations are we going to build? What's a realistic percentage goal of what we're going to build? Are we going to build 100% of it? Are we going to build 80% of it? Are we going to build 50% of it? Because the reality is we can't do 100% of 100% of our goals. We simply can't. And so when we're making a decision to move towards one goal, we need to really weigh the reality that, yes, this is going to take away from our ability to achieve another goal. And so maybe we need to implement additional policies to help offset that. Maybe that's a sacrifice we're willing to make. I don't know. I don't think that we really have had that discussion enough as a body and in the public to make that determination. And so as I've really, one of the things when I talked with Brenda's student council group, they ask, what's it like to be on council? And I tell them that I love it, but the reality is it's not always good versus bad choices that you're making. It's frequently good versus good, or bad versus bad, or some really confusing hybrid of the two. And when you're making those decisions, you have to sacrifice something you value in favor of something else that you value. And every time you make those decisions, it hurts. And if it doesn't, you need to get off council, because it should hurt. And I've told my wife, if ever I tell you it doesn't hurt to make those choices, that it's time for me to be done. And so I look at this, and I am willing to eat a little bit of crow and say, look, there's a lot of benefits to this. It's sort of a user-based fee. We have a desperate need for roads. It's a funding mechanism that allows us to advance our goals in building infrastructure, which is a top priority of the community. I don't think it'd be accurate to say that the developer's going to pay their fair share. They're not going to pay their fair share. But certainly, it's fees directed towards the usage of the roads. But I think there's some cons that we have to be honest about. It was really hard for me to be honest about the pros of this proposal. But in the conversations I've had, I guess in summary, I'm going on too long because it's been such a difficult thing for me. I think this is probably a route the city needs to take. But I don't think I'm ready to take it tonight, because I think there's other problems associated with going down this path that we can and should address simultaneously to help balance out some of the negative consequences. And some of those include evaluating what our long-term goals are, helping determine what we're going to do to help tilt the scale back to where we're not tilting in favor of these major corporations at the expense of the local flavor of the local business owner that we want. And to really understand that, okay, if we're increasing the cost of homes here, and that's going to impact our economic development and our ability to have homes for the people who are coming to work in the community of Schertz, and therefore impact the ability of companies to come develop in Schertz, what are we going to do to offset on the other side? Are we going to reduce tree mitigation fees? Are we going to have some sort of sliding scale in terms of fees related to development? What are we going to do to help offset the negative impacts of the roadway impact fee? so that we can achieve 80% of all of our goals instead of 100% of one goal and 60% of another goal. And so that's the challenge I have. I don't know what kind of time limitations we have related to this, but I felt like that's necessary. I know you said 30 days, but I don't know if that's 30 days from the day we adopt the ordinance, or I don't. Yeah, if you know the answer, absolutely.
So hold on.
Oh, sorry.
We'll get to that.
Sorry. And so that's I'll shut up now. Thank you.
No problem. I just want to give the council each member of the council opportunity to bring things forward. If there's questions, we'll take them all at the end at once, I think. Others? Mr. Edwards?
You know, as I said last time we had this discussion about impact fees, when a developer comes into a community, they're coming because there are customers, they're coming because they see the small boxes that are here, which are the homes, typically. But when a land buyer goes out and he looks at land and he's looking at it for development into a community, they're looking at the paper lots as what we call the terminal velocity of money. They're looking at how many homes they can put on that lot, and they put a pro forma together that will tell us exactly what their price point is going to be, because they need to make a profit for their corporation or for their developers, whoever that may be. Scott, I do agree that the price of homes will go up. I do agree with that. But I also agree that it doesn't fix our problem if we ignore this. If we ignore this and not do anything, it doesn't fix our problem. So we look at it as two things. We can either do the impact fees up front, roadway and impact fees, or we can continue to look at our bonding capacity and continue to issue bonds and raise taxes as we go along. And I agree. It's almost like one of those necessary evil things, and it does hurt. It does hurt. But there was one slide that was put up. Who's going to pay for this? Is it going to be the residents now and the businesses now, or the people that are coming that are adding the growth? So the people that live in Aviation Heights right now, they've been paying for years now on the home that Michael built, Ralph, Glenn Outlaw. They've been paying for years on those because we've done all these improvements to the area. So they've been paying. What do we say to that person that's been paying forever? That resident that's been here for 30 years, 40 years, what do we say to them? It's a tough job. You're right. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the weak of stomach. It's not. But we are put here to make a decision based on the best information that we're given at the time going forward to help future generations. And I feel your pain, and I hear it in your voice, and I hear it in your spirit. I do feel that. But I will tell you that I think with what this has been vetted by several of our committees, right? Economic development. Michael said last time we discussed this issue that remember when we put the moratorium and we got rid of all the smaller lots, people told us that we were killing development. Developers came and told us that. They told us that they were not willing to come out and build in Schertz. Right? They said it's going to kill building in Schertz. That's what they said. I mean, we didn't feel a blip on the radar with that because people know the product of Schertz. It's the product of Schertz. And they come here for that reason. Community, service, opportunity, lifestyle choices, quality of life. That's why they come. So, again, I feel your concerns, and some of the research that you've done. I understand that many of the cities around us are already doing the impact fees. I understand that, but I also realize too that we have to do something. We can't sit back and say, let's analyze, because at that point we get into analysis paralysis, and we have to do something. And we can't just keep going down the road of saying we're going to keep thinking about our bonding capacity. And economic development will still have to go out and get bigger wins, larger wins, for us to carry the weight for the city. So Yeah, I feel your pain. I do. And I'm quite sure everybody else on the dais does as well. But we have to make a decision.
Davis?
Now, I admire Councilman Larson's passion for this topic and the topic of taxes. And I remember last year in our budget retreat, we were talking about the budget formulation. And we sort of went down a different path last year with looking at those things that are below the cut line. And my comment back then was, I'm not a fan of raising taxes, but I'm a fan of doing what's right for the city. And sometimes that's making that hard decision of increasing taxes. Tonight we looked at improving our performance with a new planning software suite. That's well over $500,000. I have concerns about the roadway impact fee. I kind of think it's necessary. I think it's the right path to go. I do have a concern on the residential rate versus the non-residential rate, but I think we've done a pretty good job of balancing out the bottom line, and ultimately that's what it comes down to the taxpayer. We've had discussions on all of the different fees that we've charged in the city, from library to court fines to permit fees, and we're going to keep on going down that path. So, this is something that is going to impact Schertz going forward. Maybe we'll have to tweak it as we go forward, but I'm sure we're going to have some other discussions down the road with our upcoming budget retreats on how this plays out in the growth of the city and how it plays out on other financial aspects, such as our tax rate on everyone else in the city. So, keep fighting. Good cause.
Mr. Gutierrez?
No, we find ourselves at the fork of the road here, which way we're going to go. And like Mr. Edwards said, who's going to pay for it? Either developers or residents, one or the other. If developers pay, it's a one-time fee. If residents are paying, it's a perpetual fee. Like he said, every year we're going to have to pay. It never stops. Even if we charge, I think it's about a 25%, the residents still have to pay the other 75% to fix the roads. So it's still not even balanced there. Then you look at Service Area 1, about $1,600 as a road impact fee. That's still not enough to fix the road around there. Residents are still going to have to pay. And we talk about commercial enterprises. No, Santiago made a decision. There's impact fees in Cibolo, and I'm sure they were pretty high. Businesses will still come. It is the price of doing business. I just don't think it will have much of an impact in Schertz if we do have road impact fees, because even the roads will impact their businesses if they're not adequate enough.
Anyone else? All right. Anybody want to float a motion on 18M13?
So move.
Second.
So I've got a motion, I assume, to approve.
Approve.
From Dr. Scagliola and a second from Mr. Crawford. Other comments, questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
6 ayes and 1 nay, the motion carries. This was first reading. We'll have a final reading at our next meeting? Okay.
It'll come back in the next meeting, and one thing I will say is we're evaluating with regard to one of the roads that was not included in the CIP because it was built and accepted by a developer, but the development of those homes has not started. So we make some slight adjustments to the language in the ordinance based on some discussions with them going back to make it a little more fair.
Very good. And again, this will be considered again for a final reading because it is an ordinance that we do require ourselves to do that in our charter. And then I think that probably the sentiment of council that I've heard over the time that we've had this discussion is that this is going to be something we're going to want to review on a regular basis. I don't know if that means 90 days or every 180 days or thereabouts, but it's something we're going to want to keep our eye on, and something that we want to make sure is working the way that we intended for it to work. And if there are any unforeseen consequences or cascading effects, we're going to keep our eye out on that and talk about them if and when they come up.
Yeah, and if I may tack onto that, Mayor, credit to Planning and Zoning Commissioner Breaux. I think he's been the strongest advocate of really needing to have a more in-depth discussion about impact fees as part of the semi-annual updates. We've started to make some adjustments, and we'll continue to add to that to make sure we're having these conversations more in depth of how is it working, what's the impact, how are we spending those, and clarify that plan. So again, credit to him for pushing us that direction.
All right, very good. So I, again, apologize for jumping around on the agenda, but we do have a need for a closed session under Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, and with regard to Project E038. So I show that it is 3 minutes after 9. We're going to go into our closed session. We'll come back out as quickly as we're able.
Yeah, I think you and all other grandparents are like, hey, can we ask a favor of you during spring break? I know Sarah's mother-in-law. All right, it's I show 9:26. We're back in open session. The next item that we have is following up on item number 17, and that is item 17A, which is take any action based on discussions held in closed session under agenda item 17. I'm told there's no need for that. With 17 being disposed of, we need to go back now to item number 13. And item number 13 is a resolution, 18R24, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acting city manager enter into an agreement with the City of Seguin and the Schertz Seguin Local Government Corporation, the SSLGC, regarding the sale of excess SSLGC water and other matters in connection therewith. I love long captions. You know, in other cities, if anybody's taken the time to watch other cities' council meetings, and by the way, if you don't, I encourage you to do so. More often than not, the city secretary will actually read the captions rather than the chair reading the captions. But it's been a kind of the way we've done it here for a long time, and I don't know. We might change that shortly.
We'll see. You and I will talk about it. I don't mind doing it. It's just a matter of we've always done it that way, so we keep doing it. It may not be a best practice. Maybe we'll let the next person deal with that. Mr. Waite.
Mayor and members of council, at our last meeting, I came during a workshop to discuss a request from our partner in Schertz Seguin Local Government Corporation, the City of Seguin, to enable them to be able to sell water to third-party wholesalers out of their allotment. So, and I'll just briefly kind of touch on that. Staff from Seguin came and talked to us in November, and in January, the mayor of Seguin, after their council took action approving them doing it, the mayor sent a letter to Mayor Carpenter saying we would like to sell water out of our allotment from SSLGC to a third party. On the presentation I put NBU, that was what we were talking about at the time, but it's not necessarily NBU, and I'll get to that in a second. But they would like the permission of us and the SSLGC board to be able to sell water out of their allotment to a third party. The agreement requires that. The 1999 agreement that founded the corporation requires that if either side wants to wholesale SSLGC water, that they have to have the permission of SSLGC and the other city, the partner city, to be able to do that. And then the funding model from the founding documents is also a part of what of what drives this, and those funding documents, or the founding documents about funding, are critical because that's what all the bonding that SSLGC has is based upon. And so the SSLGC attorney Patrick Lindner and the bond attorney, who's the same bond attorney we use, Mr. Coons, are very adamant about making sure that 1999 agreement can be amended, but we can't mess with how the funding was dictated in that first agreement. And so the pricing model for water from SSLGC, and we touched on this real quick, is that all SSLGC customers pay the same O&M rate, or the operations and maintenance rate. That's what it takes. That's the cost, the total cost to SSLGC to get the water out of the ground, to treat it, and deliver it to the customer. To the customer cities, the third-party wholesalers they sell to. And the O&M cost is based upon full production, or the anticipated budgeted cost is based upon full production. So if there's very little marginal cost if we produce 8,000 acre-feet of water or 12,000 acre-feet of water. And for that reason, the more water that SSLGC can produce and sell to people lowers the O&M cost for everybody else that's buying water for them. And then there's a funding formula on the debt, and the way that works is the other customers of SSLGC pay a portion of the debt on the overall project as it sits today. So SAWS, for us transporting water for them, and the excess water they buy from us, pays debt. Springs Hill, City of Selma, City of Universal City, all pay a portion of that debt. And once that's figured out what they're going to pay, the remaining portion of debt is split 50-50 between us and Seguin. And so the effective rate, or what does the water cost, is our O&M rate plus our portion of the debt for that gallon of water, or that 1,000 gallons of water, or that acre-foot of water, however you want to look at it. And those two pieces, those two costs together is our effective rate. So if it's 61 cents per gallon for the O&M rate, and our debt is $1.20, then our effective rate would be $1.81 for whatever volume that might be. Same with Seguin. And that is where the partners at times have had concern, because you can see for the first part of the history of SSLGC, the orange line Seguin and the blue line Schertz, we more or less sold the same amount of water. And then Schertz started growing, our development started taking off. Seguin also found a small hiccup in their distribution system, where they were sending what they thought was river water to an industrial customer, and actually it was SSLGC water. So they turned that valve off, and so you kind of see from 2009 to 2010, Seguin dips pretty dramatically, and then they've kind of stayed level, and we've kind of ticked up each year as we've gone along. Well, as we've consumed more water, our effective rate, or what we pay per gallon of water, has come down for SSLGC because the debt is divided by more customers than Seguin, who has fewer customers, so their debt payment per customer is bigger, or per gallon, or whatever measure you want to use. So their effective rate has escalated. Our effective rate has come down over the years as the corporation has grown, and we've started consuming more of our allotment. So what we talked about a couple weeks ago is that we've worked on, up until recently, a partnership idea of it being 50-50. And one of the things that we got into a couple years ago, looking at us needing the Guadalupe project and Seguin not really needing that, but us also trying to get Seguin to partner on the 36-inch pipeline, the parallel one that is currently in the process of being designed and built, was that Seguin got the benefits of us taking away half of the capacity in the first 36-inch pipeline by selling water to SAWS, because that kept our rates low for 5 or 6 years with no increases. So we've always kind of viewed this as a 50-50, but that Guadalupe project kind of skewed that a little bit, because Seguin, although they want a share of that Guadalupe water, really doesn't see a time where they're going to really need it. And so we started looking at this, is this truly a 50-50 partnership? We take care of our 50, they take care of their 50, and the heck with the other person? Or is it more like a marriage partnership that at times can be 50-50, but it sometimes can be 80-20 or 20-80, depending upon what is needed by the two parties of the relationship? Don't look at me funny.
Our spouses can get copies of the DVDs.
Yeah, I know. And what had previously been done is any additional water sales benefited all buyers through the lower O&M costs. And as long as SSLGC was selling that water to other companies, it benefited both cities equally in the amount of debt we had to pay, but not equally in the effective rate that we each had to pay. So it didn't do anything to help Seguin. And Seguin, we both have equal shares or allotments of water, so there's so much water we can pull out of the ground a year. And the share that Springs Hill gets and Selma gets and all those different organizations get comes off the top, and then the remaining whatever's left is divided 50-50 between the two cities. So it's usually for us 6,500 to 6,800 acre feet a year. And we're getting to the point where we're starting to say, you know what, we're going to be consuming that ourselves here pretty soon. But Seguin's really not, and they don't really see a day that they'll ever consume their full allotment for a whole host of reasons. One is their CCN where they conserved water to is surrounded by Springs Hill. And so their water customers are really not going to grow. What could grow for them could be a large industrial user like another Niagara that they had before, but they've also made choices to service those folks with their surface water out of the Guadalupe River and not use SSLGC water for that. So what we started talking about was, does this harm the other partner or not, and how do we make sure that it does or it doesn't? And if we're going to agree to this, what kind of mechanisms can we put into place that says, you know what, neither partner is going to get harmed, and if one partner gets a benefit today because they have that opportunity, if the other partner gets the opportunity in the future, say 2 years, 5 years, 8 years down the road, what assurances do we have that that other partner will be able to take advantage of that same kind of benefit that the first one was allowed to do now? And so we did a number of things to get to where we're at tonight. First thing we did, and we discussed this last time we were together, is that we got Dan Jackson with Will Dan to do a rate study based upon 3 scenarios. The first one is based upon a proposed 2,000 acre feet being sold. Scenario 1 is SSLGC sells that like we normally have done. Scenario 2 is that SSLGC or Seguin takes an additional 2,000 acre feet out of their allotment and sells that to the third party, and what are the benefits or the damages to either party or SSLGC if Seguin's to sell it. And then the third was a scenario we just came up with that said, as a partner to partner, just to look at what it said and what it did, was what if we don't change the funding that says each city is responsible for 50% of the overall debt, but each city would agree to pay the portion of debt compared to how much of the overall total allotment between the two. So if Schertz took 56% of the water and Seguin took 44%, then we would pay 56% of the debt payment, even though we're only on the hook for 50. Seguin would pay 40. That would help equalize those effective rates a little bit. We just wanted to see what that model would do over a 10-year cycle. Or a 5-year cycle, I believe, from a rate-setting standpoint. So scenario 1, which is where SSLGC sells the water outright, There'd be no operating rate increase for estimated of 4 years, and only a nominal increase afterwards based upon however long the contract was to sell that excess 2,000 acre-feet of water. The impact on Schertz, due to lower operating rate and allocation, our proposed rate increases going forward would be reduced or decreased, and our total cost of what we would owe SSLGC over 6 years would reduce by almost $3 million. So that's our debt payment as well as the lower O&M for the water we buy from SSLGC. Seguin, very similar, a little bit larger impact on them because they would save more debt if the SSLGC was saving it. So they had a little over a $3 million benefit. And then Seguin would also get an additional revenue, and you'll see what that came in as, because if it was a customer that Seguin could sell to, but SSLGC was making the sale, then SSLGC doesn't have a system to get past Seguin to NBU, Springs Hill, anybody else. So it would have to go through the Seguin system. They'd get what we call a wheeling charge, a transport charge for transporting it through their system to pay for wear and tear and updates on their system. Scenario 2, where Seguin pays it, again, operating rate increases lower, same as Scenario 1. It's no difference to SSLGC because 2,000 additional acre-feet of water are being sold by them. They don't. From a rate setting standpoint, it doesn't matter if they sell it or if Seguin sells it. The impact on us, we'd have a lower total cost of water due to the lessening operating rate increases, but we get no benefit from rate reduction. And then the impact on Seguin, they would have higher expenses from SSLGC because they're buying 2,000 more acre-feet. But then them turning around and selling that to a third-party wholesaler would more than offset the Seguin, the additional rates that they'd have to pay. And then Scenario 3, basically, it lowers the total cost. There's no changes to SSLGC. It would lower our total cost or lower on water due to the lessened operating rate increase, but we would have it. And if Seguin sells to a new customer, it would help our debt payment because Seguin would actually for a while surpass us in the amount of water they're selling until we got close to our max point. And so actually who was paying the most debt, we'd go from us doing it to Seguin doing it for 2 or 3 years, and then it'd rotate back to us doing it. And then again, Seguin, all of that's going to be washed out by the amount of revenue they're going to get for selling the 2,000 acre-feet. So here's a synopsis of what it is. The benefit to Schertz on Scenario 1 where SSLGC pays is 2.8, almost $3 million. You can see Seguin with the wheeling charge included is actually an additional $500,000 across 6 years. Scenario 2 where Seguin just sells outright, we would see a rate savings across 6 years of about $370,000 or about $60,000 a year. But Seguin would see an overall increase in revenue or a lessening charge, however you want to look at that, of about $6.5 million. That would free them up to do other things like capital improvements and things like that. And then if we did it by the debt proportional as to however much of the total allotment of water we were paying, of 54% versus 46%, that would have a greater benefit to us. We'd see about $1.3 million over 6 years. Seguin would see a little less benefit, about $5.8 million. There were a lot of concerns with Scenario 3 just from a legal standpoint. Do we start messing with the funding formula and all that other stuff? And we had some long discussions with our partners in Seguin about a number of different scenarios. And Seguin has been approached by NBU to sell water. Seguin is about ready to make the decision to sell NBU, even though we're working through this agreement so they could sell them SSLGC water. They're looking really seriously at selling it NBU river water or their surface water. NBU is already on that. It's a greater benefit to Seguin than them selling SSLGC water because they can produce it cheaper and sell it somewhat close to what they could sell SSLGC water, so their margin's a little bit bigger on that. And so part of what we worked out with them is that they were actually looking at trying to do a couple of things. One was go ahead and sell that water to NBU from their surface water allotment. And then in their surplus allotment on their half, work to sell that to Springs Hill in lieu of SSLGC selling that to Springs Hill, which in the 1999 agreement they're allowed to do because they were doing it prior to the formation of SSLGC. They gave it up at the formation of SSLGC, and there was a caveat put in the agreement that said if nobody can sell to a third party without permission unless you were selling to that third party prior to 1999, which means Seguin can, on their own, sell SSLGC water to Springs Hill without any permission from anybody because they were doing it prior to 1999 and voluntarily gave that up. So we were able to sit down with them, and the other part on our presentation to council last time was that we have a small water supply concern coming up based upon projections from our engineering firms that SSLGC uses. So Walker Partners does water projections for Seguin and for Schertz and for SSLGC as a whole. And what they are now showing based upon our growth and our projected growth is that there is a possibility we may wind up where we max out our allotment and surpass that in water demand by a little bit, not a huge amount, but surpass that prior to us having the Guadalupe project online, which the 1999 agreement never fathomed that, and so there was nothing in the 99 agreement that said, hey, if one partner uses their full allotment, they get some of the second partner's allotment if they're not using it all, and that was never agreed to. So the engineers basically put this model together. This is SSLGC's total demand. The different colored lines, the red one is what SSLGC projects. The green is what the Texas Water Development Board projects through the Region L water plan that our water projects are in. So you can see it's a little bit higher than our engineers. So overall, you see SSLGC as a whole doesn't have a problem meeting that demand. And even with an additional 2,000 acre-feet of sales, which is that dotted line right there, we'd still come in right there around 2020 where we're going to jump up with the Guadalupe water availability. We'd still be below the projected availability of water. Seguin, of course, the Texas Water Development Board shows them increasing, but they don't take into things that our engineers do, like their CCN and their capacity to expand their system. So our engineers, the SSLGC engineers, show a nice little bit of an elevation, but a pretty flat demand curve for Seguin going forward for SSLGC water. And then here's our demand curve that they built. That's the most recent one they've done for us. And I think the years are off at the bottom because this should actually be when we enter into 2020. Right around the 2020 timeframe, 2022 timeframe. Not completely worst case scenario, but not best case scenario. So on the 50% down or below 50% towards the worst case, is there's a possibility here that in certain for a year or maybe 2 years, our demand may be anywhere from 300 to 500 acre feet over what our allotment is. There's a lot of things that depends upon. If we go into another drought, that may be 600 to 800 acre feet a year because the water supply will be more. We have wet years during that time. We may not ever use our full allotment until we get into the Guadalupe. So there's things there that we're not sure of, but based upon our growth, based upon what they're seeing in our water usage compared to our growth, for planning purposes, they want us to be aware that this gap is here. There's a number of ways we can fill that. We have the same opportunity that Seguin does. We don't have surface water, but we still maintain 3,000 acre feet of Edwards water rights out of the Edwards aquifer. We don't like to utilize that for everyday supply because if we lose our 36-inch pipeline and it's a catastrophic failure and it's not just down for a few days but is down for weeks or months, so say worst case scenario it comes apart underneath Interstate 10, that would be a catastrophic failure that we would be without. The 3,000 acre feet of Edwards water, we really are trying to hold in reserve until we get the parallel pipeline in place. Parallel pipeline's finished and we start to exceed our allotment before Guadalupe happens, then I think we have an option to use our Edwards water to fill that gap, probably at a cheaper rate than buying it from SSLGC. But that's some other options that we have. So we sat down with Seguin and we walked through a number of these items and we spent some time trying to hammer out an agreement. And what we came up with and what we're asking council to consider tonight is the agreement that basically has, it's an amendment to the 1999 original agreement. Doesn't touch anything with funding. Matter of fact, there's language in there specifically to maintain the funding agreements as was agreed upon when we sold the original bonds. But it says, our agreement says that either partner can enter into an agreement with another entity to sell water from their allotment with just notice to other parties and SSLGC, or the other partner and SSLGC. SSLGC is to check the availability, of that water, and for SSLGC to do rate setting so that the other partner gets the benefit of the partner who's going to sell to a third party. Next piece of it is if a current SSLGC water customer desires to purchase additional water, that customer should be serviced by SSLGC. So even if it's Springs Hill and they'd like to go to Seguin, under this agreement, Seguin will push them to SSLGC to purchase that water and not from Seguin themselves, and same with us. So if Selma comes to us and says, hey, we'd like to buy water from you, we're going to push them to SSLGC because they're a current member. Third one, if another city, and this was amending the 1999 agreement that didn't speak to it, but if another city anticipates they'll need more water than is available in their allotment, SSLGC can utilize a portion of the other partner's allotment. There's no permission. They can just use it and out of that other allotment to get the other partner through that period. That's aimed particularly at us. But Seguin was very adamant about that. They don't want to create a situation where our demand couldn't be met by SSLGC if it had to be. And so they agreed to that. And then lastly, about 10 years ago, SSLGC initiated impact fees. The 1999 agreement says that each city will get one take point for water. Ours is at our water plant right up here on Live Oak Road. Seguin's is at their main water plant just off the Guadalupe River. And that's all the corporation would pay for. 10 years ago, the folks with SSLGC initiated impact fees, and one of the impact fee projects was a second take point for Schertz. There was no argument against it. There was no discussion about it. It was just included in everybody agreed to it. It was included in the impact fees. We're redoing the impact fee plan right now, and the city of Seguin, because the 1999 agreement says they'll only provide one, does not feel that the second take point is a viable use of impact fees because of what the original agreement said. And so we also worked out with them that because that was the primary reason we supported the impact fees was for that project, is that they will leave it in the impact fee plan, and that when we're ready, which hopefully we'll do it with the parallel pipeline to save costs, then Seguin will not object to, and the SSLGC impact fees can be used to build the second take point for Schertz, as long as the impact fees cover it. If impact fees will not cover the total cost, we'll pay the difference out of our budgets over here. So, and our second idea for a take point, if you've not heard that in our water planning, is to the southern site where we're getting ready to build an elevated storage tank. Next piece of that's come back and build a ground storage tank right next to it, and then we'll hook it up to the second take point. Allows us to get water there more efficiently, also gives us a second take point to be able to supply the entire city if something were to happen up here with this take point. So it's a redundant thing, but Seguin did agree to that, to put that in the agreement. So we basically have come to what I would say is a good agreement between the two cities. I think it still maintains the partnership. It's depending on which side of the pipeline you're standing on, maybe may determine whether or not you think it's great as a partnership or it's not great as a partnership. Seguin did, despite their objections, did allow us to continue forward with SSLGC and the Guadalupe project. There were some things we put into that agreement specifically to help Seguin out, even though they may never need it. Like they're entitled to a portion of the Guadalupe project. They're not going to pay for it until they need it, and then they'll make up the debt payments and that kind of thing, but they've got that insurance policy. And it's much here, too. Seguin needs to raise some capital. They're doing a lot in their community. They have a lot of really, really old infrastructure that has been not acted upon for a while, and they are working as quickly as they can to get their water lines, their sewer lines replaced. And that debt is causing a detrimental impact on their rate structure for their citizens. And anything they can do to sell additional water and raise additional revenue helps offset that impact. And so they feel that it's critical for them to be able to sell this additional water. Right now they're going down the line of trying to sell their surface water because they think it makes better financial sense. But in the past they've had issues trying to blend that with customer concerns and tastes. So there's one of the reasons they want to continue to pursue this is they may come back in 6 months and say, we can't do our surface water, we're going to go ahead and sell SSLGC water to them. And so We get a little benefit out of that. It's not a huge benefit. It does keep the O&M costs lower to us. By the rate models across 6 years, I think it was $370,000. I mean, that's not break the bank money, but it also allows us to set up, once we get into the Guadalupe project, to be able to offer those same services to some of our neighbors that may be needing water services that aren't current members or current customers of SSLGC. And so it opens that door up to us as well in the future to be able to sell a little bit of water over here, and instead of just getting the wheeling charge, we'll be able to make revenue off of the sale of that water. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sure. So I've got a couple just points of clarification for me for the most part. I believe I saw and you have said that should we need to exceed our 50% allotment, this modifies the 1999 agreement and would allow us potentially to negotiate more water than our current allotment on the current well fields.
This agreement, I think, goes a little step further. This agreement says if we need more than our allotment and it's available from our partner, SSLGC sends it to us. There's no asking, there's no permission, it just happens.
For me, and for given the 2020-ish milestone that we're going to hit, that's the most important part for me at this point. The second most important part is that Seguin did, in fact, back us when they had said that they would not. We went back and asked them for an accommodation and for help in signing on with us for the new well fields that we're developing in order to get the highly advantageous loan from the State Water Board, and they backed us, and really they got very little out of that. And they stood with us as a good partner there. I do not at all want to say no to Seguin. There is some get, some quid pro quo here that's good for both cities. What you've come up with is, given a challenging environment, what looks to me to be an elegant solution. So I would hope that the council would support the proposed agreement. That said, comments, questions from council. Mr. Crawford.
Mr. Wade.
Yes, sir.
In agreeing with what the mayor just said, I have no intention to not vote in favor of this. However, I do have a concern about the 2020 timeframe and the issue if we don't have enough water, whether it's a drought or the Guadalupe project isn't finished or close enough to being used or whatever. I like the concept that's in the trilateral agreement relating to the water sales. It says we can, if we need, how close to our 50% are we using now, do you know, or how much will it be in the next 2 or 3 years?
I think we're about 83% right now is what we're slated for this year.
So it's conceivable we could be at the 100% of our 50% in 2 years, depending on development and such.
Weather.
And whatever, weather, anything in really. So the issue of having the ability to take, and the question I have is, are we purchasing that water effectively from Seguin if we use their share of their 50% or part of their share?
No, because right now, for the two cities, we're both this year, I think, allotted 6,800 acre feet apiece, so that's 13,600 acre feet. The corporation doesn't pull the 13,600 acre feet out of the ground. They only pull as it's needed. And so we're going to use 83%. Seguin's going to use about 42 or 43% of their share. So together we're going to take about 60% of that 13,000 acre feet out of the ground. So if we need an additional 300 acre feet from Seguin's allotment, we'll pay SSLGC just like the rest of the water, because they're just going to spin up and produce it. It's just on the tote board on the wall, that 300 acre feet is going to be moved over to our 6,800, and we'll be allotted 7,100 this year, and they'll be allotted 6,500.
There's not a requirement to compensate them for that in any way?
No, and I don't think either party is interested in doing that. We had a conversation today, and Mayor, I probably should have clarified this when you asked. The agreement allows for SSLGC, if we go past our allotment, to take what we need out of the Seguin allotment as long as it's available. So Seguin selling 2,000 acre feet of SSLGC water to another customer leaves 1,200 acre feet available out of their allotment, give or take. If they find a different customer that wants 3,000 acre feet, that takes them almost to the max of their allotment as well. And so in conversations with Seguin today, we talked about a number of things. One is they don't anticipate that. They're still driving towards selling them surface water, which makes this a non-issue. If not, the customer that they have identified is interested in 2,000 acre feet, which leaves plenty of capacity out of their allotment to get us through that time period if we do exceed the demand of our allotment. The other thing Seguin was interested in, potentially, because I was like, can we put something in there that would kind of say, hey, if we needed 300 acre feet, that you would give that. And what we talked about is, which is something we don't want to do with our partner, is if Seguin says, hey, we've got this 5-year contract to sell this 2,000 or 3,000 acre feet a year, and we say, well, in year 3 and 4, we may need 300 acre feet of that. They're like, well, what do we tell the customer that wants it all? So one solution is the city of Schertz would sign a take or pay agreement with our partner, which means we'd pay them for that 300 acre feet whether we needed it or not. And Seguin's not interested in that, and we're not interested in that. The other thing Seguin did offer is that if it's critical for council to have the comfort level to pass this agreement, they would be willing to have the engineers drill down on that number. And if it's 150 or 200 or 300 acre feet of water, that they would be willing to put a clause in there that either partner couldn't take more than X minus 300 acre feet. In other words, they'd reserve 300 acre feet out of their allotment if they found a customer that wanted to buy every drop of water they had. I think part of that, I think there's some security in that, but I also think that where we are today, that 300 acre feet could be 800 acre feet, or it may be nothing. And so I would rather, when they bring it to SSLGC for capacity calculations, that yes, we can supply you that additional X acre feet, Seguin, to sell to somebody else. I would rather at that time have the conversation based upon the more current numbers. We're going to be 6 months, a year, 18 months closer to the time period where we may surpass our available supply, is to have the conversation at that time with our partner and say, hey, this is really looking like it's going to be 250 acre feet, which we really need until we can get that parallel pipeline open. And so we need 250 acre feet for the next 2 years, but the pipeline's slated to be up and running in a year, so really we only need it for a year. But we could have those conversations at the time that we know we're going to run into that bind, as opposed to trying to guess 4 or 5 years down the road and put an arbitrary 300 acre feet there when it could be more than that, or it may not ever reach that amount, if that makes sense.
I thought of something that we didn't talk about earlier. If we know that Seguin's looking at a 2,000 acre foot block each year to a particular customer, could we do something like the following? In the tri-party agreement, put that before any additional water is serviced, which means it wouldn't be available to us, we have to vote and talk about it again. Because that would give the customer wanting more water notice that we have an issue with that based on it's 2 years later, we know how the pipeline's coming along, and we still have to keep our Edwards aquifer water, some of that available for taking the pipeline out of service to fix something. We don't know how long that could take. Could be 3 days, it could be 3 months. So I'm looking for a mechanism that gives notice when more water is needed by a third-party customer out of Seguin's share. And I've made the comment before that I would be willing to pay for that water as opposed to just take the water, because it's that important that we have water for our city. And that's just a personal view. Mm-hmm. Because sitting here, that corporation was put together to provide water for these 2 cities. And I'd like to be able to, for them to be able to do that in a way that's still really still fair to Seguin because they have the right to sell a portion of that water. I'd like to squeeze that as tight as we could, and they maybe could sell every gallon that we don't use.
And I agree. If I felt we could do that in a way that was accurate and more guaranteed, I would hate to see us enter into, because what you're kind of describing is a take-or-pay contract, and I would hate to see us enter into that saying, Seguin, we're going to pay you for this 350 acre-feet, even if we don't think we need it, in hopes that we might, because it does a couple of things. One is it has us paying for water we're not using, and we may never need, and not that we're gambling, but I would rather address that when Seguin comes and says, hey, we do have a customer that wants that water. They have to come to SSLGC, not for permission, but to make sure that there's capacity there, which would allow us to intervene at that time and say, now it's 2 years later and we're not going to need any, or it's 2 years later and we think it's really 700 acre feet. Because as soon as we get into that take or pay, let's say it's 350, and Seguin goes, okay, now we can sell every last drop we have.
I don't want to do take or pay, really.
Yeah.
But I would like to have a mechanism that gives notice, legal notice, enforceable notice to some extent, or however you want to phrase that, to a customer that wants to add on to the 2,000 2 years or 3 years down the road. And that would give us a chance to have a better evaluation of what we need to do at that point, instead of trying to make a wild guess today, 3, 4, 5 years before we know for sure what we need. It's a balancing act, but I'd like to have it worded such that, SSLGC is going to look at the availability of distribution or quantity for distribution, but we need to be able to have a legal mechanism that says we can step in and say, wait a minute, we're going to need 250 or 500 acre feet of water, whatever the number is, and we know more clearly at that point than we do today.
I think we could have those discussions. The 1999 agreement gives us that, and we're trying to amend that for a couple of reasons. One is because there's things not in the 1999 agreement that we need, but the other one is, honestly, we say, we're not going to do this amendment. We're just going to go with the 1999 agreement. We're fine with SSL or Seguin selling 2,000 additional acre feet. It lives 1,500 acre feet shy for them. Is that the danger we run into, or the risk we run into, is that they say, thanks, that's awesome, and we're going to go ahead and sell our SSLGC water to New Braunfels. And oh, by the way, in about a year, we're going to sell our remaining 1,400 acre feet to Springs Hill, and we don't have a say in that. This gives us a say before they do that. It's not permission, but it gives us a chance to talk. Seguin's willing to do that. They're willing to put an arbitrary number in there based upon the engineer's calculations if we want that to be more secure. After that, we would get into a point, I think, where they would want to start talking about us paying for that amount. If we wanted more security than that we're paying that amount. They feel they're giving up a big ticket. They're giving up the ability to sell to Springs Hill at any time in this amendment. Their council had angst about that. The staff has angst about that because that was a thing they always had in their quiver. If we need additional revenue, we could sell water, and Springs Hill needs it, we could sell water to them and they don't have to go to the corporation. And so they're giving that up in lieu of saying, you know what, oh, by the way, we're also not going to sell SSLGC water to NBU right now. But we're giving all that up in an effect to make it easier for us to do it in the future, and to give us that security that if we have that opportunity, that we can take advantage of it from a long-term planning on their part. So I think we could go back and hammer that out. My concern is that it would come that they would want to zero it in on a specific amount of water that we would need, and the engineering estimates are not firm enough for my comfort level to say we need X, when it could be X plus 500 or not even any at all. And I'd rather address that at the time when they come and say, okay, we've got a customer. I'd rather address it at that. I mean, personally, if council desires us to go do that, we'll go back and meet with them. We'll hammer out a number. We'll get something working to make this happen. It's tough because we don't know what that number is or if that number is even a real factor. So we could put a clause in there, but that concerns them. They're giving up their ability to sell to Springs Hill, and then they may be giving up a clause. They get a 2,500 acre foot customer, and we go in and go, no, we may really need 1,500 acre feet from you. So it's the worst case scenario if the partnership in 5 years or 4 years is not what it is today.
Anyone else? Dr. Kaiser?
I'd like to move to approve resolution number 18R24.
Second.
A motion from Dr. Kaiser, a second from Dr. Scagliola. Any other comments, questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 I have 6 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. All right.
Point of procedure?
Yes, sir. Raise your point.
Is anything remaining on the agenda requiring action by council tonight? I don't believe it is, but I want to clarify.
I do have to go back to a couple of things, and give me just a moment, if you will. There's a discussion workshop with regard to Phase 2 Parks fees that is not on for action. Mr. Crawford has asked if we could postpone item number 15, since it was his item that he requested. I would encourage council to grant that request. Item number 16 is discussion only. There is no action listed on that one. And the last remaining item that we have would be the additional closed session to begin discussing the appointment or the seeking of a new city manager. And that could be for action, but I suspect probably would not be at this point. That's not actually a procedural question nor a procedural answer, but I chose as a chair to answer it anyway.
Well, I figured there'd be grace from the chair. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a second. A motion to adjourn from Mr. Larson, a second from Dr. Kaiser. Effectively, that would mean that we simply would not take up any of the 4 remaining items, and we would ask staff to roll them to the next agenda. Procedurally, that's not problematic. I do have a motion and a second. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
So I have 5 ayes and 1 nay. And given that, that is a final. So I don't even have to say if there's nothing else from staff or council, because council has voted to adjourn this evening. We stand adjourned.